True, and we did see during Damorquis' player preview that his favorite card is Adrenaline Rush. So Adrenaline Rush is somewhere within these 4 decks, and that kind of gives us a clue for what we're in for. But we can see an Ethne versus Whispering Hillock matchup.
So right away we see Spellitel, kind of an old archetype from closed beta or even the start of open beta. We saw it a lot. Haven't seen it in the past few months. It definitely has its weaknesses. You have very tall units. They're quite susceptible to Igni, to Scorches, especially in the finishing round. But in this case, Damorquis tends to bring that, and we see a very interesting list. Whispering Hillock finally with Siren and Moonlight and Werewolves.
Yeah, and what Whispering Hillock may clue a lot of players into is that this is an Imlerith Sabbath list. It's the card that people love to hate and hate to love, and it's going to be interesting to see how Molegion chooses to implement that against this Spellitel lineup of Damorquis.
It's right, Damorquis bringing the Spellitel on blue coin. It's not something I expected. I expected maybe his own Sabbath with Eredin, or maybe even Alchemy.
Yeah, what's interesting about the Ethne list actually is it doesn't run a spy. So if you're running it on the blue coin, you're going to have a hard time in terms of making sure that you do have that card advantage, which we've seen can be crucial in games of Gwent.
I think the dry pass here makes sense considering he doesn't have a spy. He can get punished quite heavily by Molegion. In this case, he just decides to pass. Doesn't really have any kind of graveyard he has to build up, like decks like Alchemy, for example, or Skellige sometimes. So he can just dry pass round 1 and not be too scared about round 2. But Siren and Moonlight in a long round, that can get very dangerous and really quickly just spiral out of control. Yeah,
and the other thing with the dry pass is it does mean that your Iris's Companions is less risky in terms of discarding the things you don't want it to discard. The more cards you have in your hands, the better that card is in terms of throwing away something that you want to throw away and not your key cards for your strategy. So Molegion, I really love this dry pass, and Damorquis opting to thin his deck a little bit, play that Swallow Potion onto the Elven Merc and just take the round that way.
It's going to be a really long round for the Sirens and the Moonlight, really to get a lot of points. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and having spoken to Damorquis going into these matchups, you can kind of see that the way his decks are built, they were towards targeting things like Great Swords and Consume. And, Molegion is one of the players in this tournament who is not running either. So because of that, Damorquis is really fighting an uphill battle. He knows what Molegion's lists are, and he knows that he's going to have a hard time in this matchup. He's said that as much.
And Damorquis really taking his time here, trying to think about all the possible outcomes in this matchup.
Yeah, interesting to see that he's opting not to pass, but I think the reason he's opting not to pass is not necessarily because he intends to play anything more, but just to give him time to think. He's got to, in some ways, try and just outthink Molegion in these matchups because he knows that he feels his decks are at a disadvantage. So using every second just to kind of consider what is coming, I think is going to help him.
He wants to mulligan these spells out of the way, so he has the Elven Merc targets, doesn't want any dead Elven Mercs, obviously. Also, we see a very sad, 3-point sentry there. I want to see it much bigger than that, hopefully later on.
Yeah, considering how many special cards are in this list, not a single silver unit, we will hopefully see those sentries get, just a little bit bigger than those 3 points. But then now it's up to Damorquis whether he plays this round or passes. If he passes this round, Molegion ends up with an Adrenaline Rush that is useless, but then you're playing a long round with a lot of Moonlight and, potentially Imlerith Sabbath to just ruin your day.
I think Damorquis can't really pass here. I think he has to commit, a little bit into this round. Maybe a Farseer, maybe 2. Save the sentries, obviously, as finishers for round 3, but he has to commit something to this round, get rid of some of those Moonlights, because if not, in a long round, a 13-card round 3, it just gets way out of hand.
Yeah, it is something that you have to kind of determine as you play it in terms of how long you want your rounds to be. Like, you can't go into a long round with Moonlight. It's just going to end badly. And Molegion hovering that Royal Decree, deciding whether or not Sabbath is coming out to play, and he's opted that, yes, Sabbath is here to shut down this round and really try and push Damorquis out so that he can't bleed Molegion.
And that's a great, tool for dealing with the Farseer as well. An engine card that can get you a ton of points over a long round. So you get a great Sabbath and also, a great removal right there as well, similar to Greatsword. So that's what Sabbath is all about. And also, of course, the sticking power. If it does stick, it just wins you games.
But what is most exciting about this play also is Molegion, he's got a 10-point, equivalent to 10 points worth on Sabbath with the 3 armor, which means it's out of that Alzur's Thunder range, which means if Damorquis wants to deal with this, he's going to have to spend Ithlin and spend both of those Alzur's Thunders on just removing Sabbath from the game and stopping it from snowballing into this round.
And I think that's very much worth it. I mean, Sabbath is a dangerous card. You have to get rid of it as soon as you can, if you can. And here we see that, it is a bit overkill. Only one point needed there, but he definitely got the job done. And, great play from Damorquis.
Yeah, you can see Molegion nodding to himself. Like, he did expect the removal, but he did realize that Damorquis, he would have to expend Ithlin to do that. Because the thing is, if the if the Sabbath was zapped, if Molegion can find a Mandrake through Hillock, for example, he can just boost it back up, heal it back up, and then keep it out of that zap range again. So it would have been a kind of battle of attrition, and by just straight removing it there, Molegion's like, yeah, that's fine. I understand why you made that play.
But it was also kind of low tempo, so it makes it so that Molegion has a much easier chance of staying in this round a card up, and there's no spy from Damorquis either. So I think Damorquis knows he might have to commit to going down a card into round 3. You'll have to decide when to do that, but it's looking tough. Especially with just big tempo plays with the Moonlight already down, waiting for Molegion. It's going to be tough for Damorquis to really catch up here and get that extra card back from Molegion.
Yeah, and with that Adrenaline Rush also sitting in the hand of Molegion, if Molegion gets enough tempo, he can reach a point where he can comfortably just play an Adrenaline Rush, maybe stay ahead, and then manage to carry over points into the next round, which is going to make those sentries that little bit less impactful.
Yeah, he has the Werewolves, the Awful Werewolves ready to go with that Moonlight down. So, I mean, it's looking quite good for Molegion, and Damorquis doesn't, I don't think he has the tempo play that's as powerful where you can get 20 points up and kind of force Molegion to go a card down. So honestly, I think it's looking quite good for Molegion. I think he has this, it's kind of early to say, but generally looking at the Moonlight and everything he has set up already, I think it's looking quite good for him.
Yeah, and I think this was a really interesting deck for Molegion to bring along, having that Moonlight in combination with the Sabbath shutting down certain strategies, and if you can't deal with it, you can't deal with it. But the Moonlight also providing those engines and weather counter, whilst also building toll, because you place those werewolves down, they become 14s. They're protecting your Sabbath from things like Scorch as well, which is pretty rampant amongst a lot of decks.
Yeah, why clear weather when you can just play, boons on top of it and just, reap the benefits from that as well. So definitely a good read from Molegion. We haven't seen Moonlight in tournaments much. I think it's a risky thing to bring. It's not as effective in some cases. It's kind of, not as consistent, I think, as other archetypes, but we finally see it coming to play here. Hopefully it can go far and, prove to people that it's here to stay, like we saw with Alchemy way back in the day and a few other archetypes that kind of, like Rachels as well, kind of went into the tournament and then became meta and ladder as well.
Yeah, and I think for Molegion and for Damorquis, looking at these lists, they've gone very much kind of off-piste in terms of where they're taking their decks. We've seen Shoop, we've seen Crack. In previous tournaments, we've seen things like Dagon and Arrakis Queen, Death Wish. It's very common, but they've gone for these very unusual lists, and I think lists that your opponent wouldn't expect, which is usually really strong in the quarterfinals, because in the quarterfinals, your opponent doesn't have your deck list. But unfortunately, due to the matchup, Damorquis and Molegion, they got matched together, they know each other's lists, and so this is coming down to kind of a battle of wits.
And normally Fog here would be great, but because there are 3 Sirens and 3 Moonlights in the deck, it's not going to do much, but, kind of make it, so you have to play another Moonlight now this turn, which might be good if you're going to go into a long round 3. 2 Moonlights down already could be, pretty good for Damorquis going into round 3, but in the end, the Fog won't do much, just delay the Moonlight a little bit. Yeah,
it does deny him having Moonlight on 2 rows, which is going to slow down the engine just a little bit, so I can kind of understand making that play and kind of forcing your opponent to spend some of their engines so that when you do eventually pass this round, you don't have to deal with it in the next round.
You can't eat into Fog again, but probably not the best play. I mean, I don't think Damorquis wants to go into, or you can Blood Moon, of course. I don't think Damorquis wants to go into this Weather War, but it looks like he does. I mean, he's going to go for it. It's going to be just, Moonlight Hazard constantly until someone runs out of options. And I think the Molegion might run out first, because obviously Spelltell is a spell-oriented deck, has many ways to replay spells and summon spells, so Damorquis might win this battle.
Yeah, it seems that Damorquis has opted for a strategy here in the second round where he just tries to stop the Moonlight. So he's using the Fog, he's using the Glace, he will probably use the Ethne, and instead of maybe trying to win in round 3, he might just try and shut him out in a 2-0.
And these Werewolves and Awful Werewolves look great with Moonlight on the board. But once Moonlight's gone, there's 7-point bronzes, 10-point bronzes, not the greatest average value. So Damorquis might be onto something here. I think he's definitely studied these matchups, he knows what he's doing, and he might try to sup. I mean, maybe he can stop the Moonlight train after all.
Yeah, it is quite difficult, because although Molegion has a Recon in his hand, there's 3 cards left in his deck, so it could find him a Siren, and it could give him another... a little bit emoting there, but it could give him another Moonlight. The Ethne in Damorquis' hand will just instantly shut it down, and I absolutely love this strategy coming out from Damorquis to use this to try and shut down this Whispering Hillock deck.
And that was not the greatest discard there. Monster's Nest going to the graveyard. It's a very powerful card, very good silver in terms of average value. Would have probably preferred, a werewolf going to the graveyard, but there's an emote from Molegion saying, maybe you got a tiny bit lucky there.
I mean, that is a risk you have when you run Iris's Companions. Like, it can potentially discard the cards you draw. It can discard good cards from your hand. And, he did play it with a decent number of cards in his hand. It's not the be-all and end-all in terms of what's gone, but that's a risk in the deck. And if you choose to have Iris's Companions to try and improve your consistency, sometimes it just does the opposite.
Yeah, and with Sabbath, you sometimes need to find Sabbath no matter what. It's kind of the cornerstone of the deck. So I think it's worth the risk bringing this card to just, like you said, increase consistency in finding Sabbath, both with Molegion and also Iris' companions.
Yeah, and we see the Solar Potion there going on to Isengrim and just trying not to make anything too tall. I think in this kind of situation, players are always a little bit nervous about building tall in case of things like Igni or Mandrake or those kind of cards. And Molegion does have a Mandrake in his deck, and Damorquis knows about it. So you can see he's trying to be careful in the way that his units boost. That Farseer, he can't really stop it from getting too big, but when he's playing those Swallow Potions, he's not going to make Molegion's job easier for him.
Also, Wisper's Tribute to get that Mandrake out as well. So it's it's consistency, and you're going to find it, I think, pretty much every single game. And Damorquis knows this. He has to be very careful, especially with the sentries. I mean, those get really big. They get boosted. That's a Mandrake waiting to happen.
That is true. But the thing is, I'm kind of interested to see how this Adrenaline Rush plays out, because with Damorquis in the driving seat, he may just try and force this round, thinking that maybe Molegion has that in hand. And that in hand is a dead card. And if it's a dead card, this round is effectively even.
As long as he's able to use Recon, thin the deck out a bit, I think he'll have the chance to mulligan it anyway next turn. He'll have that one mulligan. I think there aren't really any dead cards. He was talking before to us about bringing Dagon with Fogly, but it sometimes bricked his hand when he had cards like the different Moonlights and the Adrenaline Rush to mulligan. So I think it makes sense to bring Hillock here, and I think it makes it so that he can probably mulligan that Adrenaline Rush if he needs to in round 3.
But he can only mulligan it if there's a round 3. And the way Damorquis is playing here, it looks like he's trying to almost all in on this round. We already have a sentry come out there, and yes, you can typically expend one sentry in round 2 to try and force the round and push your opponent a little bit further. But if we see him expend more sentries, that is very indicative that Damorquis is out for blood, or blood moon, I guess, in this situation, and wants to win this round.
And also no Renew from Molegion. Sometimes you see Renew in the Sabbath list. If it gets killed once, you can bring out the Renew and bring it back into play. But I think Molegion went for a bit of a safer list, not going all in on the Sabbath, using Sabbath as a bit of it got removal on the Farseer, got some decent points, but it's not, everything doesn't revolve around the Sabbath, even though it kind of looks like it does. The Moonlight archetype is a completely different, beast compared to the Sabbath, and it gives you 2 chances of winning, 2 win conditions, let's say, and you don't rely completely on the Sabbath, for example.
That is true, but speaking of dead cards, Damorquis is sitting with a Royal Decree in his hand and 3 gold cards on his board. So he himself has a dead card in the Royal Decree, and Royal Decree is dead for the rest of the game, whereas Adrenaline Rush is still viable this round, depending on how things turn out.
And that can happen. I mean, this is a game of skill, but you do get unlucky every now and then. You can get paired with your teammate, you can get, a bad matchup, and you can get dead cards in hand. I mean, like Adrenaline Rush maybe, it might not be the best card in the situation. It's better in other situations. Royal Decree also no target. So, I mean, it can happen. We've seen it in pretty much every game of Gwent. And an Artifact Impression there, that's quite a lot of points. A big gap now between Damorquis and Molegion.
Yeah, I did like the way that Molegion was stacking his werewolves and alpha werewolves into one row. You can do that and then play Moonlight on that. You don't always have to play them into Moonlight. You can play Moonlight into them. And I think that's what he was going for there, having had his Moonlight countered twice. What it meant was instead of trying to force that Moonlight and use the engine, he can still use it to boost those units. Unfortunately, with the Artifact Compression coming out there, that does deny the 2 little baby wolves from coming out to play. But honestly, I feel like Molegion is in a very strong position with this situation, because Damorquis has to hold Ethne, because Damorquis knows that Molegion has Maruna. Damorquis doesn't know that Molegion doesn't have Maruna in hand, but he has to hold it for that eventuality, because if that happens, that is the round basically over. You can't do anything.
There's still a big swing left as well with Wisper's Tribute into the Mandrake, into the Farseer. It's a huge swing where Molegion can catch up very quickly. I don't think he's really pressured into, in any kind of way being 2-0'd. I think he has the cards he needs, except for Adrenaline Rush. I think everything else is looking pretty great for him for this round to at least get to round 3. I mean, I don't think his hand's looking pretty decent, so I think he'll definitely make it to round 3 at least.
Yeah, I think Molegion, honestly, in this situation is feeling pretty comfortable. He does have those big tempo plays. He also has Hillock, and Hillock, there are a lot of good options on Hillock in terms of the organic cards. You have things like Adrenaline Rush if you want to keep things going. You have Mandrake, you have Monster's Nest. You can find a new Monster's Nest if you happen to decide to discard yours. There's lots of options for Molegion in how he wants to play this, and I think Molegion's in control in this situation.
And Damorquis got quite lucky with the Ida pull as well. He doesn't have it in his deck. It's more he got it from the Isengrim, so it was quite good to just kind of stop the whole Moonlight train going, and it really helped him stay in this round and really put a lot of pressure on Molegion, where we thought he wasn't going to get his card back, and now he's definitely going to get his card back. He might even 2-0. I mean, this is a big gap for 2 cards.
I mean, 43 points to 70, that is 27 points for 2 cards. But remember, Damorquis does have a dead card, and not getting the Moonlight, I think that's what he was looking for there. But the reset actually is huge. The Cockatrice onto that Farseer is gonna spell disaster for Damorquis. And, things looked like they were going in Damorquis' favor. But I would say, the tides are turning, the deer are migrating, and things are coming back towards Molegion's favor.
That's definitely right. I mean, we saw Mandrake, but we also have other cards that Molegion did bring preparing for this kind of, situation. He has the cards that he might need to shut it down. He might want to even save it for next turn, but I think he needs the points right now. He needs a tempo swing right now. He's 27 points behind. He definitely needs to catch up at least a little bit.
Thing is, you can think about saving it for the next round, but when you have the Wispus in hand, the words are hard. Yeah, the Wispus tribute into the Mandrake for next round. You're quite comfortable taking that this round because you don't want to take the risk, leave it in your deck and not draw it.
He's going to maximize points here, obviously not going to reset the Farseer immediately. Instead, he leaves the option for Wispus to reset it with Mandrake and doesn't let it get those extra points after the reset for the next 1 or 2 or 3 turns, depending on what Damorquis wants to push here. So very smart play from Molegion, trying to maximize points. He's in a bit of a pickle. I think he knows he needs to really try and play to maximize points now. Can't play it risky, has to play it very safe and just do the right plays at all time.
Yeah, it's a 10-point reset versus a 12-point reset, right? And so that's the thing. You're not really sacrificing too many points by targeting that sentry over the Farseer. And as you said, because Damorquis is in control, waiting, I think, is a good choice. And there's the pass from Damorquis. Molegion needs to make up 11 points in one play, which he can do quite comfortably.
We can do some math here from Molegion. I think he's quite a math wizard, so I think he definitely has it under control. Just needs to do 1 card. They'll both be 3 cards going into round 3. Of course, Damorquis will have Last Say, which is very beneficial when you have a deck like Spellitel with sentries that can get Scorched or Ignite or Mandrake. So it's always important to have Last Say. It's quite an important thing in Gwent, and Damorquis has that.
Yeah, the Alzur's Double Cross, it is a werewolf, so I think that was why he hesitated on the werewolf versus cockatrice, because he could potentially just guarantee the cockatrice if he manages to thin all of his werewolves. But Molegion now basically deciding how he wants to close out this round and what it is he wants to take into the final round.
And the Whispering Hillock could not be enough. So it's always dangerous to play Whispering Hillock because it could, brick in some way and kind of not be the greatest option. We're going to see a healing Mandrake here from Wispus Tribute.
I think he's playing. Do you think he's playing the Adrenaline Rush this round?
Itself.
He is. He's opted to take the carryover and instead of throwing that back into his deck, just keep those 12 points for the next round.
Is 12 points? I mean, it's a risky play. I mean, you're obviously going to be completely proactive. There's going to be no reactive plays whatsoever.
I'm really surprised though. If you make that play, why don't you? If you want to think about that play, why wouldn't you Mandrake Iris's Companions? Shiru.
Molegion seems to not be completely convinced with his decision right now. He's going to do it, but...
Yeah, but I still don't understand why he didn't target Iris's Companions. There's no Shiru. I mean, Molegion knows that, so, Shiru's not really a good argument for that. Damorquis is out of gold cards, so it's interesting to see that Molegion opted to Mandrake the tribute there, and maybe that was a bit of a misplay from him.
And he gets So he gets the Succubus, or the Maruna, sorry. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was looking so great for him in the start of round 2, but right now with Moonlight and Maruna in hand, Maruna without if you have to play proactive with Maruna. You're in a bit of a pickle, especially against a deck that has so many options, like the Ethne, for example, to react to that. Yeah. And this is not a good Whispering Hillock. This is why Whispering Hillock might not appear in tournaments so often. It can be good. There are some great options, but those 3 in particular, I think, might be the 3 worst options in the situation.
Yeah, so what do you do here? I feel like Damorquis is going to know regardless of what he does that it's a bad pick. So you may as well admit that it's a bad pick. Maybe play that Adrenaline Rush for a little bit of a friendly joke. And you can see Damorquis, his face there. He is so happy about that. He was just like, what on earth just happened?
I think he needed good luck to win this matchup and maybe even the series, and I think he's getting it for now. I think he's quite happy with what's going on here. Molegion, I'm still not convinced with the Adrenaline Rush. I guess he was expecting the Moonlight and wanted to have a chance to mulligan away a card, which is why he decided to. And I think maybe even the ADC was dead possibly, which is why he mulliganed it so aggressively.
Yeah, potentially, but it can't have been because we saw the werewolf in his deck from the recon. So, ADC was fine, but I guess he wanted more points. And, he wanted more points, so opted to play that Adrenaline Rush. But I definitely think it was a little bit of a misplay in terms of what he chose to target. You see Damorquis there with Ethne straight out with the zap onto that Maruna, stopping that steal, actually getting the Sage as well, get those extra points in there, getting that zap out, denying the steal from Molegion, and that's all she wrote.
That's a pass from Molegion. Damorquis very happy with his first win. Like we said before, he wasn't favored. If you look at the deck list and you look at it, really, analyze it, he was not favored in this matchup. Damorquis teched a bit more aggressively towards Greatsword, so he had maybe a 65% chance of winning against someone that brought Greatsword or Consume. And Molegion played it a bit safer, maybe had a 60% chance, but was better in general against everything else. And in this particular matchup, Molegion had a bit of an edge.
Yeah, but I do think Molegion and Damorquis both played that very well. But Damorquis, he has been studying. He has been planning his kind of win conditions for each match. He knows that in this situation, he is going to have to fight tooth and claw for this position. And both players, they want to go to Challenger. They want to compete for $100,000. $25,000, yeah, that's nice, but $100,000 is a lot more, and the winner of this gets that spot, and the other person is going to be in a really tough position in terms of qualification. So you can tell that, despite the fact that they're teammates, and that they've practiced together, one of them is going to have to take out the other.
Damorquis on blue coin now. Normally you pick Aridin, but a little bird has told me that he might be going for more of a bamboozle strategy, trying to. I mean, at this point, when you know each other's deck list, everything is psychological. You have to really try and get any possible advantage. I think Damorquis might have a bit of a surprise for Molegion here. Molegion might expect a certain deck right now on blue coin, and I think Damorquis might surprise him.
I think Damorquis is actually on red coin. He played that last game on blue coin, so.
No, he was on red coin. He's sitting in red coin seats. So.
Oh yes, of course he's on blue coin. My mistake.
He's on blue coin for game 2, and I think we're going to see, not such a regular blue coin deck, but I think Damorquis has his strategies. He thought a lot about his win conditions because he was not favored initially, and in this case, he is going to be bringing. Kraken Crate was banned, so that is.
That's Kraken Crate for Molegion.
For Molegion, and that is Alchemy on blue coin, which is not something you see every day. Normally, it's on red coin, but in this case, Damorquis. He has his plans. Yeah,
he's, I think, trying to trick Molegion a little bit. Molegion expecting the Aridin there and then seeing the Yan, so trying to get Molegion to pick something that's a little bit less favored in this matchup. Like, Damorquis, he's going to have to use every trick in the book if he wants to, take this series. It's going to be a tough one, and I think it's going to be an exciting match.
And we see some very interesting cards for Molegion's Skellige. This is not Greatswords. This is not Veterans. This is a Demune Pirate Warship Control crack deck, which is not something you see every day. Definitely a surprise when I first saw it. And important to note as well, Molegion in Season 5, he had the Skellige faction record and the faction record of all time for any Pro Ladder season, which is incredible at 1,557 points. That is absolutely astonishing with Skellige. It was with Veterans and a mix of Veterans and Greatswords. It wasn't with this deck, but still, you can tell he's very proficient on Skellige.
Yeah, and this is a deck that I think is going to surprise a lot of people when you see the way it's played out. It is kind of a control Skellige, the pirates are taking control kind of situation, and the thing is, Damorquis knows about it. So this is the thing. We had all these exciting kind of surprises, and instead we have this tooth and nail matchup. We see Damorquis with the Trisk Telekinesis, thinning the Roach, playing that Swallow, and starting to get through the cards in his deck and putting him on the board with 20 points. Trying to kind of push Molegion a little bit.
Yeah, it's a big play to start on blue coin. It definitely says, you're not going to bully me out of this round. I'm here to stay in it and try and win it if possible and have control of the game. 20 points right off the bat. You're wasting Roach, obviously, and you're wasting a gold card, but it definitely cements his ground here.
Yeah, I mean, and Roach isn't always a mistake depending on whether you're running a Seer or not. And Damorquis, I believe, isn't actually running a Seer, so that is a Roach that can never go back. But he does have, a whole bunch of different options here for kind of closing out cards and trying to stop him. And Molegion, that Demon Pirate, that's the biggest unit in his deck, so by thinning them there, it means that his crack, I believe the target for the crack on crate is...
Either Whalers or yeah, I believe it's just Whalers.
Yeah, I think it's Whalers. There's one Whaler left, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Damorquis isn't going to be row stacking. He's playing a alchemy deck. Although I think he's playing Swallow Potions instead of the Ale.
Yeah, he's playing a few differences, but generally it's a pretty standard alchemy deck. Aside, you don't have a Sai, which is a pretty card you normally see in alchemy, but still, 25 points up. Damorquis is definitely saying, I'm here to win this round. Like, there's no contest here, and of course, the Demon Pirate is a perfect target for the Viper Witchers. I think that's the bamboozle that Damorquis wanted to play into Molegion. Saying you're going to play right into my deck, even though you think you're going to be favored. I'm not going to play Aridin. I'm going to play alchemy instead.
Yeah, and those Witchers in Damorquis' deck are doing exactly 11 damage, so that is the perfect target if you want to be taking units off the board or just dealing the maximum amount of damage and getting the maximum amount of value. We see a Pirate Captain coming out into the Warship hitting a unit 4 times for 1 damage. So it's 1 damage times 4. So it counts as 4 hits, which means if you have units that benefit from hits, that's times 4. But also a nice little control strategy you see there, taking out Roach and putting Roach in the graveyard. And Roach ain't coming back. Like, Asir's not there. Roach is gone.
That's definitely the best target, because obviously Triss can be a target for Mandrake, and the Viper Witchers can be revived by the Ointment. So it's always best to go for, whatever card doesn't give your opponent any more, ways, lines of play or possibilities, and Roach is definitely the card there.
How did that?
Oh, there are in fact ales in this deck. I thought it was Soul Potion, but it turns out there's ales. So
a little bit of both, everything, 3 and 3 and 3, I think, because he's hitting for 11 with Alchemy, so he has to have both ales and Soul Potion, and of course Ointment and 2 silver. We have the Black Lib there, and I believe there's 1 more, and there's the Mandrake as well. So.
Yes, the ales were not in the Ethne deck. That's where I got confused. But the thing with this deck, also, you're spreading your units out. That's kind of the strategy. So those warships are going to have a harder time seeing value. So this matchup, like Damorquis, I do think he kind of surprised Molegion a little bit in playing that Yan on the blue coin. With that said, Damorquis has Cantarella, but Molegion has Udalryk via Heim and Skjall. So when a player opts to play that spy, not all spies are made equal in this situation.
And no rain farm for Damorquis either, so he can't really answer back the gold for gold trade in terms of the spy war. But yeah, we see Damoon Pirates, we see the warships coming out. Both players do have to kind of play into their graveyards a bit in this round 1, both with Viper Witchers for Alchemy and the Novices, and of course also all the Damoon machines that you need to res later with the Corsairs. You need to really play in round 1 and have a chance there. And we see Swears. Swears is a card that I think is targeted towards a different matchup. Maybe it's Consume, who knows? But that's normally the normal target. In this matchup, it might be important, but I think it won't be crucial in winning the game.
Yeah, there's really not a great Swears target in the current board setup either, so will be interesting to see how Damorquis opts to play that. But what I really love that Damorquis is doing is he is putting all of those boosts on that gold card. He knows that there is Coral waiting in the wings for Molegion, and he knows that if he boosts a gold card, that Coral ain't gonna, I guess, make a toy out of anything, to use, I guess, a Mogwai line.
And we see Molegion putting the pressure, playing a spy there with a great, it's a 5-point spy. That's pretty fantastic in Gwent. 5-point spies are normally quite positive. We also see Renew. Renew is not a card you normally see in tournaments. It can be bricked sometimes if you don't play enough gold cards. It can be tricky to play properly, but Molegion is also playing Burna. And Burna with Renew, that is a lot of weather that some decks don't have, any way to deal with it, and it can, add up a lot of points in the long run. I think that's Molegion's kind of strategy. With control decks, you normally have a very linear line of play. You don't have, engine units that can get you points over time, and that Burna Brand, I think, is the answer to that. Yeah,
but the thing is, Burna Brand is not in the hand of Molegion. Currently, Damorquis is not going to be feeling the Burna, to put it lightly. I think it'll be interesting to see how Molegion opts to use that Renew. Like, yes, you can double Burna, but you also have access to Heim, and then you can start kind of going fishing for your opponent's silver cards, and it'll be interesting to see if that is something that Molegion opts to do. But he can't do that until there are gold cards in his graveyard.
And there's finally the Kraken Crate coming out, probably going to bring out a Whaler if we're not mistaken.
Yep, it should be onto a Whaler, and also strengthening it, which does make those Corsairs even more valuable. So, you could have chosen maybe to mulligan a Dimon and basically try and pull them with your Crack. But if you can use Crack onto a Whaler like this, you get that 10-point Whaler, suddenly your Corsairs, which resurrect a machine, become even more powerful. And then if you have the Restore onto the Pirate Captain, onto the Corsair, onto the Strengthened Machine, that's when you're seeing a lot of points, a lot of cards in one play.
Yeah, the package with the Corsairs and the Damoon Pirates and the machines, and just with Longships as well, we've seen it with boats for quite a few metas, quite a few seasons. It's a really strong package. I mean, it's consistent. It gets you a ton of points. Corsair at 3 points, I personally think it's too strong. I think it's just a really, really strong card, and we've seen it pretty much every tournament, and that's, it has its reasons.
Yeah, Corsair is doomed, so it doesn't go to the graveyard, but the Pirate Captains do, so you still have that Restore target, and it does make, life pretty happy. But a very closely fought match at the moment. 7 cards a piece, 46-41, both spies played.
And little by little, Molegion is catching up. You're only 5 points and would have overtaken there and put Damorquis in quite a pickle. Damorquis is still playing pretty decent points. He needs, Molegion needs 20 points here. He doesn't have any huge swings. I mean, Coral isn't as effective right now. Renew's obviously dead. Corsairs are pretty much dead, I think. There's no boats in the graveyard yet, or there might be one actually, but it's not going to be enough anyway. So Damorquis can stay in this for now. He has the chance to stay in this. And I think in a short round, because Control normally doesn't have the greatest finisher, the greatest engine play, it's more of a, better in like a mid-sized round and at controlling your opponent's strategy, obviously. I think Damorquis wants the shortest round 2 and 3 possible to really get that huge combo going with Vilgefortz and Kalvit, and just his leader ability and just Nilfgaard in general is very bursty in round 3. Yeah,
the thing with this matchup is both players have cards which access their graveyard. So both players are doing their best, not to kill the other opponent's cards, which is easy when you're playing alchemy, and it's very difficult when you're playing a control deck where you have boats dealing damage, you have warships dealing damage. You know, you're trying to bully down your opponent, but Molegion, he has to be very careful about the units that he chooses to move, and you'll notice that the way he's been moving units, he's ensuring that he doesn't kill units to activate Damorquis' ointment. The problem for Molegion is that Damorquis has 1 ointment in hand, and Molegion has 2 Corsairs and a Dead Renew in hand. So Damorquis, if he chooses to play this round long, Molegion is just going to have to pass and give it up.
You see Call of Heat coming down. That's a big, you know, expending a big card there, leader ability. Obviously adds 5 points to any play you make, and also gives you the chance to pick between 3 plays for the optimal play. So, but Damorquis felt a bit of pressure there, and again, it created a bigger gap than before. Molegion, he definitely won't catch up in 1 card. Not anytime soon, anyway.
It's also opting not to play the Witcher and not to kill things, because his targets in terms of killing things, there's not great options there. You don't want to kill the Whaler, because, as I said, you just bring it back. So you don't really want the Witcher, the Viper Witcher. So what Damorquis opts to do there instead is just take the points. And he knows he's going to draw into the Witcher and Swallow Potion in the next round. He knows that his Vilgefortz is a Witcher from having a peek in his deck from Jan. So he can kind of decide how it is he wants to play these cards and what he wants to do with that information.
Probably going to see a Call of Heat move here. Gets max points, kills in, also enables Coral to have 2 different targets it can hit. Just trying to open up the lines of play with Coral to get maximum points, and maybe a turn or 2 when he decides to play Coral. This turn, we see 3 dead cards in hand, like you said. The Corsairs and the Renew, both dead, so Molegion's time is counted. It's, you know, he doesn't have unlimited time here in round 1. He has to get out of this at some point.
He basically has 2 cards to play, and if that doesn't work out, that's kind of it. Damorquis is in a pretty comfortable position. He could choose to play the Swears here. He's seen so many cards go on the board anyway. He kind of knows what to expect. He may be holding it for a Corsair, because often people put the Corsairs back into the deck so that they can instead draw them with the Demons. But he could, you know, afford to play this and really just push Molegion at this point.
Not just for tutoring, but also not having Corsairs in hand round 1 when you don't need them. You can save them for round 2 or 3, so you normally mulligan them. Same thing with like Freya's back in the day with a lot of Skellige archetypes. So, like you said, that would be the best Swears target. I think he probably won't find it this turn unless he deals with a machine now, but Swears in this matchup, not a great card. It might just be a 9-point card. And Blackblood there on Ancient Foglet, probably one of the best pulls, considering there's only bronze units now. 12 points is you know, fairly decent for a silver card.
Yeah, I think that's what you like to see with Blackblood. You know, typically in the past it's been used for things like Osril and Ghoul, but considering neither player is setting up the graveyard, I think an Ancient Foglet is something that you're pretty happy with.
You definitely don't want a Foglet, a normal Foglet. You want the ancient one.
Yeah, the big boy Foglet, none of those little Foglets. Oh man, back in the day with Foglet decks, that was a fun time in Gwent. Anyway, here we see the Coral coming out there onto the Viper Witcher, which I like as the choice. Viper Witcher, that's denying more graveyard stuff. You're basically trying to limit what Damorquis has in his graveyard, and by turning something into a little toy, you know, you no longer have a Viper Witcher in the graveyard. On top of that, you know, you're leaving the Udalric up, which isn't really a great card to have in the graveyard unless you're looking for Osril or Ghoul. But having seen the Ancient Foglet come out of Damorquis, he doesn't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, in Coral this turn, I think it's not a great matchup for Coral either. It doesn't have, you know, it's great targets like in Spelltell, for example. So, yeah, I mean, when you get 13 points in a Viper Witcher, it's pretty okay, and also lets you catch up. You're only 7 points behind now. It's definitely doable with the warship you have in hand, because everything else is bricked. So that's definitely not the option there. If Damorquis passes now, that's Molegion's last chance to win this round. If not, Damorquis just needs to push 1 more turn, and he has this round in the bag, basically.
Yeah, like Molegion basically has to decide, is he going to play the warship or is he going to pass? And if he plays the warship, if Damorquis plays 1 more card, then he has to pass. So the question is, how long of a round do you want in the future?
I go for the Swears here. Damorquis, very smart play, getting rid of the Swears, which he doesn't really need. Creating a big enough gap where warship won't be enough if he has to play the... He's going to check his... Yep, there's no machines there, just making sure.
Yeah, and Molegion, he can't catch up. He doesn't have enough going on in this situation in order to catch up with Damorquis. He's got, 11 points there? So that'll put him on 73. So he has to pass.
And Damorquis doesn't know this. I mean, this is something that you might expect 1 dead card, maybe 2, but when you bring Renew, when you bring Corsairs into round 1 and you're not able to mulligan them, then you get into a bit of a pickle where you're forced out of a round much earlier, and Damorquis can get rid of a Swears and still win round 1, where Swears is not useful in this matchup at all. I think that was a great round for Damorquis. He doesn't know how fortunate he got, and he might be a bit weirded out by this pass, but he took it, and that's turn 1 for him, or round 1 for him, which is extremely important in Gwent.
Yeah, we see Champion of Hov, and there is the Burner.
It's too late. I mean, you lost so many turns, so much time already. Burner Brand, it thrives on time as a resource. It needs a lot of rounds for it to get maximum value or a lot of value. And in this case, I mean, we're still going to see a fairly long round, but if Damorquis can split this up, and still stay ahead and get his card back, and Burner Brown's going to be, very close to useless.
Yeah, you can see Molegion, he was mousing over the burner there and shaking his head. He wanted to see that in the last round. He wanted to put that pressure on Damorquis, because Damorquis has to play into multiple rows. He can't just avoid the burner by, not playing onto rows, because you're playing the Ale, so you have to play into that. Alternatively, you lose value in the Ale. And even if you don't play into the Burner Brand and the Skellige Storm, with the Whalers, he would have been stacking all of those units into the weather, and this would be a very different story. And it kind of comes down to what Damorquis said. Like, Damorquis feels like he needs to get lucky in these matchups, and so far Damorquis is getting pretty lucky in these matchups.
You go for the dry path, which is a safe option here. You guarantee your card back. You kind of play into the burner a little bit. You don't really have weather clear, but I think it's risky to go into round 2 and keep playing, because if your opponent is able to catch up and surpass you, you're going to end up going to round 3 a card down. So I think it was a calculated decision from Damorquis. Might be the right one, might not be. We'll find out in 6 turns. We'll find out, in 7 turns, very soon.
I think it's quite an interesting choice as well, because taking that pass, it means that Molegion, he has a kind of interesting choice here with how he wants to play that Renew and what he wants to play into this round, because Heim isn't great.
I mean, Heim into Swears, that's the only option, really. Heim into Swears is the only option you have. I mean, there's no other option. I mean, you can also do Coral, of course, but Coral won't be too many points. It's probably better than Heim into Swears, though. That is true.
Yeah, Heim into Swears, you get Swears and Roach, neither of those is looking particularly hot for you in round 3 when you've had such a long round 1.
And now I think Molegion will know, or Damorquis will know not to stack. He knows Molegion's deck. He knows Burner Brand is in it. He shouldn't know his deck, but because we're practice partners, he does probably know it. He has a very good guesses. And he's going to know not to stack the rows, at least not initially. Try and take away as many points from Burner Brand as possible. And we're going to see Burner Brand come down immediately, I think, for as long as he has a row that can take a few points of damage.
Yeah, and because we've seen the Ale come out so many times, Damorquis doesn't really need to row stack anymore. The problem he has is those Corsairs. Those Corsairs are going to be bringing back the Harpooners. The Harpooners are going to be stacking all of Damorquis' cards into that Skellige Storm. So the Skellige Storm, I think, is going to be pretty nasty. And like Molegion, I agree, he definitely wants to get that on the board nice and early to start putting units in it and making them feel the pain.
And the Corsair, we're going to see the real bronze value for Corsairs coming down. Reviving, 10-point Whaler. That's going to be a lot of value for a bronze card.
Yeah, and the thing in this matchup as well is Damorquis isn't running the Vikavara Medics, so Molegion doesn't have to worry about that graveyard grief that a lot of players would be worrying about at this stage. He can choose to resurrect, as and when he wants, but actually opting to play the Corsair into the Harpooner with nothing on the board. When
you're playing proactively and every single one of your cards is reactive, that's what happens. I mean, you have Burner Brand, you don't know what row to put it on. You have Champion who can't really duel himself, that would be a bit sad. You have the Corsair, Whalers and Warships are both reactive cards, so that's the problem with control decks at some points. If you go, into round 3 having to play first, you end up with plays that just are not as optimal.
I feel like for Molegion, that was a situation where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. He can either play the Corsair, play the Harpooner, hit nothing, or he can play Burner Brand onto nothing, and they kind of equate to the same thing. Because if he plays Burner one, turn later, he can place it onto the Witcher. Whereas if he played Burner and then moved the Witcher into the weather, it equates to more or less the same thing.
And there's Burner down. As soon as you see the unit's going to come down immediately, put down that Skellige Storm. A great effect. I love it visually. But I think Damorquis is not going to love it as much. It does a lot of damage over a long turn. Thankfully, this one isn't too long. Kind of a mid-size round 3. Not the shortest, but not the longest. And we're going to see some damage, especially the Whalers, like you said, being able to kind of line that all up in the back row.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see the kind of way that Damorquis chooses to play this, because he knows the Whalers are there. So in some ways his best bet is to play smaller units early, try and force Molegion to use his control on units which don't really give him much value, rather than putting something big and tasty into that Skellige Storm. It may be better just to try and play things smaller so that Molegion has an issue. But at the same time, Molegion doesn't have anything very big on his board. So those Witchers, you're not going to see those big 11-point hits that we saw right at the start of the game. So it's kind of a little bit of a cat and mouse of who can control who the most.
We're going to see him just spreading it out, making Molegion work for it. He's going to make him play those Whalers and drag everything to the back row in chains, because he is not going to run into that storm by himself.
Yeah, I think the units are going to have to come kicking and screaming into the storm. But love that play by Damorquis, solo push, and again, onto those gold targets. He's not making the misplay and playing into that Coral, because he knows there's Renew. And he knows that Renew, the best choice, if he has Renew for Molegion, is that Coral. So by putting the points onto those gold units, yes, you're going to drag them into the storm. Yes, they're going to get hit for, a couple points per turn, but you can't get that big value out of Coral.
I think he might go for the 8-point whaler here, just to play around that Viper Witcher on the 10-point whaler. Try and save some points for at least a little while, and keep the cap at 8, basically. We'll see if this is right, but I believe that would be the best play to at least save a few turns. You might just go for the 10 immediately, but yeah, I think 8's smarter. It makes it so that was a misplay, but thankfully you can now drag it back. And Molegion is going to drag that Dandelion right into the storm. Dandelion not very happy, putting a bit of a fainting expression there. I would too.
I think that's fair. I think Molegion going into this matchup was feeling quite confident, but Damorquis has kind of shown him that, you know, even if you're confident, it's Gwent. You know, there's still card draws. There's still kind of chance. It depends on what you draw. And Damorquis is just trying to, you know, take every advantage that he can get in this matchup. And Molegion, I think, trying to kind of play his small units, like we said, to kind of bleed out that removal. But the thing is, Damorquis, like he's got access to lots of different things. He can burn units in the Skeletal Storm anyway. Vilgefortz comes out. We'll see what he pulls.
There's a big pull here.
What's it gonna be? Oh, the suspense. It's Swallow Potion!
What an unexciting pull. 2 bronze cards that have very average bronze value.
Yeah, we saw a Vicar Varro into a Swallow Potion. And again, stacking those points onto those gold cards. You know, what are you going to do? Artifact compression of Vicar Varro Novice?
And we're seeing some I mean, artifact compression for Damorquis isn't the greatest card to have in hand. It's looking like, what, a maximum of 8 points, and taking away value from Viper Witcher as well, if it does hit that 10-point whaler. And Molegion has some okay cards in hand. Coral's not going to be the greatest. The Skeletal Storm is still ticking.
That is true. It's a tough one to call. Like, I think Damorquis has done an astounding job in terms of the matchups that he's got, the ways that he's choosing to play and stuff. And like you said, that artifact compression, not great. You're going to hit a 10, you're going to make it a 2. It's an 8-point play.
Mandrake isn't great from Vesemir either. I mean, there's not really anything that's boosted on Molegion's side or anything that's hurt on Damorquis' side. So all of a sudden, you're looking at pretty suboptimal plays for Damorquis. It looked like he had control of the game. He had the reactive plays to Molegion's control crack here in round 3, but all of a sudden, I mean, it looks like just the Corsairs and just the pure value from the Whaler is going to be maybe a little bit better than Damorquis.
Yeah, and the way this match is going, you know, that Heim into Swears isn't looking so bad. That's still a 12-point play. And, you know, Coral, like, yes, she's a 5, but you're creating a 2 and there's no target. So Damorquis, he feels that pain, you know, having that artifact compression in hand. He is the toy master in this situation, and it's not working out for him.
And the Champion of Hoth as well, pretty decent play. I mean, average, maybe not in terms of removal value, because there isn't really a target you want to remove. There's no, you know, a great sword or any card that you really need to get off the board immediately. But just from the pure points value, I think it's a decent silver card. It's not like Artifact Compression, which is a bit worse, I think, in terms of points. So we're going to see Heim here into Swear, which is not what you normally see, but we're going to see it here for the first time ever.
So he's going to discard all of his Dandelion powers.
No.
Oh no, what shall I do? I like that from Molegion. I think, like, he you know, Damorquis played around the Coral really well, but at the same time, Heim, you know, it was only a 12 here, but Heim, because of that access to silvers, in different matchups, it can be so swingy. So I think Molegion is playing pretty solidly, and oh, it's so close.
It's very close. Your Skeletal Storm is still going to tick here. Vesemir, not the greatest option, but could still be decent. There isn't really anything that's getting, because obviously that boosted Dandelion Poet isn't going to be able to get healed by Mandrake because it's already boosted, so it's not going to really, you know, do much, even if it's taking damage from the weather.
And the question here, what does Molegion choose to fight? I don't think you want to fight that 15 because you're going to be damaging things, and then you know that there's a Mandrake, you know that there's a Vesemir. So you could target target Poet, but he's in the weather, you know, he's taking the brunt of the weather. So maybe instead of going for taking out the Poet, which is slightly bigger, you just take the 5 points and be happy with it.
Yeah, solid 12-point play, not too shabby. You also have the Skeletal Storm still taking to add a few extra points over the next few turns. There's quite a big gap here as well. You know, I think this is Molegion's game to win here. I don't see, unless there might be two options from, there won't be Mandrake. So Vesemir could possibly hit a bronze alchemy card, which could do it.
Yeah, I think it has to be a bronze because Mandrake's not enough.
We saw Blacklit already, so that's definitely not an option here.
And there's the Swallow, and it's not quite enough. And Damorquis, you gotta hand it to him. Like, he is really pushing Molegion, and you know that Burn of Bran, it turned out was enough just in order to get those points. And you saw with the round 1, you know, Damorquis, the fact that Skeletal Storm didn't come out, I think made Damorquis realize it's not in his hand. I need to push this, so that you can make that round as short as you possibly can. But even then, like, the Brenner Brand racked up a lot of points there for Molegion and managed to cinch it 1-1. One win for Ethne, one win for Crack and Crate. We still have to see Jan and Whisper and Hillock on the side of Molegion. We have to see Eredin, which is pretty spicy, and Jan Calvé on the side of Damorquis again. The only list I think we haven't seen here is we haven't seen Jan Calvé off of Molegion, and we haven't seen Eredin off of Damorquis yet. So these are the ones that I think are going to be kind of interesting.
I mean, we're looking at, I think, Molegion, he's quite happy he won this game. I think he knows that he needed to win this because Damorquis going 2-0 up is dangerous, even though he's on blue coin next. So there is that. Actually, he's on red coin next. So yeah, definitely losing that match would have been disastrous for Damorquis. Right now, Damorquis, I think he knows that he's in a position where he can win it. Eredin is a tricky deck, especially against Molegion. I think he's not favored here. And we're going to see Eredin finally. This is going to be a Sabbath Frost variant. Instead of Moonlight, it's going to be Frost. So instead of helping your own guys out, you're going to be damaging your opponents. It's a more aggressive strategy.
It's Team Arathusa. It's more like Team Imlerith at this point, with both players bringing very, very different Imlerith lists. We see Ice Troll in the hand of Damorquis. There is a card you do not see very regularly.
There's Imlerith in hand. You also have the no Frost, which is great. You have to mulligan those away so you can get them out with the Wild Hunt Hounds. We see Soldiers now from Molegion. He seems to have a pretty okay hand. Swears could be useful on Wild Hunt Hounds, but unfortunately, there's already 2 in hand, so it's not going to be as effective.
Yeah, but the thing with Damorquis' list, which is going to be really tough for him, is that Damorquis is not running a lot of bronze units in this hand. So if Molegion gets a good Swears, especially onto something like the Drowner, you can end up with a lot of dead cards. Damorquis in that list, he's got Frost, he's got Recon, he's got Adrenaline Rush. So if Molegion can get a good Swears, you're very much limiting the cards it is that Damorquis can play.
We see Frost coming out as soon as possible. I think he needs to rack up those points immediately. If you want to see this round, Joachim coming out right off the bat. That's a risky play. I mean, you don't know what you're going to get. That's a box full of surprises. But Molegion's thinking about it.
I think what he's thinking is if he can get something big on the board, then Damorquis can't play Imlerith.
And he has 2 sentries already, so Novice into Ointments is probably why you don't want to play Joachim so early.
So now he decides, do I want to thin an Ointment and just throw it in the graveyard, or do I want to play it? And Damorquis, you see him making a little kind of squint at that play, but there is a 12-point unit on the board, which means that Damorquis can't play Imlerith from hand if he wants it to survive. If he wants to play Imlerith from hand, the units on the board need to be 9 or smaller. The problem is that Frost hits the smallest unit, so Molegion can actually protect that Vic of Varro by just playing smaller units into that row. And oh, look, what's that in his hand? It's Slave Infantry. What does that do? That plays small units on every row.
And if he gets killed, then he can finally have the Ointments enabled, so it's not the end of the world. You do want to normally keep your Slave Infantries on the board, but if one gets killed, it enables that chance to res, so it's not the end of the world like we said. There's the Switch coming out, but only 1 Wild Hunt Hound. Still quite effective. It makes us you have to play 1 Frost from hand or mulligan all game long, which is always not, it complicates things in round 2 and 3. We are going to see Molegion also trying to create a graveyard in this turn. He really needs to, in this round, he really needs to start creating a graveyard with the Slave Infantries and making sure he has, those Ointment targets like we saw right now.
Yep.
No graveyard, no Ointments.
But what's quite nice about the Frost for Molegion is that he can play the Slave Infantry into the Frost, and the one that you play is the one that's not doomed, so he can guarantee that the undoomed Slave Infantry goes into the graveyard. We see Damorquis there playing that Ice Troll that we did see in his hand, and he got that from Recon actually, but using it to kill the 10. Because again, he's trying to enable a situation where he can play Imlerith, then he's going to try and snowball that Imlerith across multiple rounds. He wants to play Imlerith, he wants to Adrenaline Rush Imlerith, and Molegion, because he's playing his Soldiers deck, is going to have a very hard time shutting it down compared to if he was playing some of his other decks, like that Control deck that we just saw him play.
And we saw Sabbath had no chance to come on the board. Now he definitely does. Ice Trolls works perfectly with Frost and with Sabbath, and this is kind of the support that Sabbath needs to really shine. He has the removal options and also the chance to be able to get the best Sabbath targets possible as early as possible. And right away, the Slave Infantries come down, just trying to populate the graveyard a bit, make sure he has options in round 2 and 3.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see Damorquis hovering that Imlerith. He now has the opportunity to play it, and I think this is one of his ways he wants to kind of try and control Molegion in this round, is get that maybe onto the board. But on the flip side, if he does that, Molegion passes, he does have that Adrenaline Rush in hand, so it's going to be, I would say, pretty tricky for Molegion from here on out.
And there's no Mandrake in this Kalvit list. There's not that chance to Mandrake. You have the Mardrome, which could do a little bit of damage. It'll obviously weaken the Sabbath a little bit, but overall, there's not really a great direct counter to Sabbath in this deck.
But it's also pretty depressing, because even if you do Mardrome it doesn't kill it right? It puts it smaller. But then with the tribute, Whisper's Tribute in Damorquis' hand, he can then go for Mandrake and then opt to boost that back up. And you can see Molegion here. He's using the telekinesis to try and make that a little bit smaller, hoping, I think, that Damorquis doesn't have access to the Mandrake, but he does.
You see 13-13, tied game here.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what Damorquis does at this stage. His only real option to protect the Imlerith is either you Mandrake it, which I think is the better play, or you damage the Triss so that the Imlerith fights a 3 and then survives. But if he does that, Molegion is going to play that Mardrome. So I think with Damorquis, he's realizing that Imlerith is looking pretty vulnerable here. Imlerith is basically his win condition. He cannot afford to let Molegion get rid of that. And so out comes the Mandrake. There you go, 8 and a 2, and now Molegion is just looking sad. This is that feeling you get on the ladder when you see an Imlerith and you have no answers and you're like, well, maybe I'll pass. Maybe that's how I'll deal with it. And then they adrenaline rush it, and then you just go home and cry.
Especially on Red Coin, where Damorquis is now winning by 19 points on equal cards round 1. This is absolutely terrible for Molegion, because obviously Damorquis can just adrenaline rush, go 1 card down into round 2, and create a lot of problems for Molegion in round 2, and maybe just 2-0 him, because there aren't that many answers in this deck. This deck is not geared towards dealing with Sabbath. It's geared towards dealing with Great Swords and Consume, but not Sabbath in particular.
Yeah, now that Sabbath is bigger, this is where Molegion, he previously maybe could have played the Aesir, put something big on the board and forced it to fight that, but he can't do that anymore. Out comes the pass, and then Damorquis, I feel like, is going to instantly play that Adrenaline Rush, and Molegion, he knows it's in the deck, he's hoping he doesn't have it. There you can see his reaction, like, oh well, that didn't work.
And now this very big Sabbath, it can deal with pretty much anything. I mean, it's going to slowly start accumulating more and more armor, and it's not looking good for Molegion. Looking like a forfeit here even for Molegion. He thought about it, he decided to say no, but...
I think his only out is Vilgefortz, right? He'd have to burn it.
Aggressively, yeah, it's the only option here. I don't see any other option in Molegion's list. Like we said before, it's just not catered towards dealing with Sabbath, and Sabbath is very black and white. You either have an answer or you don't. Igni is an option, but it's going to be really hard to be able to line that up for
I think it's way too late. The thing is, Damorquis isn't going to row stack, and Molegion, he'd have to get to the point where there's 25 points of value on the side of Damorquis' board, at which point Imlerith has just run rampant through his soldiers, cutting down soldiers left, right. This isn't a war, this is a massacre.
And the Frost, it doesn't really matter where he plays it, because he knows that slave infantries have to go on every single row, so he can play it proactively, and still Molegion is going to have to play into it. Maybe not this turn, but he's going to have to play into it very soon. And he also has Drowners, of course, so it's...
See, no Vilgefortz. And the thing is, you might think, oh, Cantarella, that'll draw a card. But Cantarella is going to draw him Vreamed and Ointment.
Which is not an answer. I mean, Vreamed has a lot of different cards, but I think none of them will answer the Sabbath in any way. I'm pretty certain. So Molegion running out of outs, running into a matchup where he just isn't going to be favored unless he could have pulled off something with Triss and his own Mardrome in hand. Ended up not being that way because Damorquis had, just the right amount of cards like Sabbath, the Tribute, the Mandrake, and also his own Adrenaline Rush in hand. He had the combo that he needed to really assert his dominance in this game, and you can look for an answer here, but you're not going to find it. The Standard Bearer is quite powerful over in a long round, if we're going to get to that, but Sabbath is going to say, bye-bye.
Yeah, and Molegion, he was trying to find that Vilgefortz, and it's just... you hate to see it, it hurts a little bit, Damorquis. Damorquis at this point can play Frightener, and I'm pretty sure Sabbath can kill it with the amount of... Oh, well, actually, it doesn't have any armor at the moment. Let that Imler stack a little bit more armor. You can play that Frightener for free. Everything that Molegion plays is going to die. I don't know what Molegion does here. Maybe the Mardrome to try and make it smaller. I think that's what you have to do. If you see the Frightener come out, try and shrink down that Sabbath. But if the Sabbath has managed to build up armor, it might not even be enough.
And Damorquis will have options to kind of weaken Molegion's board as well with the Ice Trolls, which work perfectly with the Frost and the Sabbath. It's the perfect combo to keep Sabbath alive and keep him, dueling and killing and staying alive and adding more and more armor to the point where he just snowballs into a huge, huge entity.
Yeah, I think you start to understand why Damorquis brought this deck, because this deck, it doesn't work in a lot of situations. It doesn't work against any form of control. It doesn't work against any form of removal. Decks which don't have forms of control and removal. Great Swords, great. Consume, great. Soldiers with no Vilgefortz, great. So it's a very tournament deck. I don't think you'd ever really see this deck on ladder because you don't know what you're going to face. There's too much variety. But bringing it to a tournament, I think Damorquis, he understands tournament meta, and he understands that often new players bring things that they're comfortable with rather than things that are spicy.
And there's a weekend from the Mardrome. I'm going to try and make things a little bit better, try and inch your way into killing that Sabbath, but It's looking grim for Molegion here. Doesn't really have any apparent options to get rid of that. He has a great game plan on his own side of the board. He can start pumping out slave inventories and using sentries, and you can really snowball in a long round. But with that Sabbath getting free points every single turn, there's not really much you can do. It's going to be a boring game to cast, really, because I mean, we kind of know the result unless Molegion can pull some kind of answer out of his hat.
Yeah, Molegion is definitely just trying to find something. But the thing is, he knows Damorquis has so much control. So even if he does try and play something big, you know, he does choose to play that Asir, or Damorquis, for some reason, decides to play Frightener. Like, the Imlerith is just getting bigger and bigger, and anything big that appears on Molegion's side, you know, Damorquis is just going to kill. Damorquis is not going to play Frightener. He's not going to, you know, help. Oh, maybe he will at one point when he feels confident enough that Molegion doesn't have any points. You know, at the point where you can sacrifice your Sabbath just because your opponent is 22 points down and doesn't have, you know, many cards left.
And if Asir comes down to duel and he has the Ice Troll, he has the Drowner to push it into the Frost and get the extra amount of damage on it, so it's a smaller unit. So there's just a lot of synergy and a lot of options for Damorquis to really take control of the game and make sure his Sabbath stays alive. It's a one-dimensional strategy, but when it works, it really works, and there's no real counter to it. Like we said before, it's very black and white. You either have the counter to it or you don't, which is why some people, you know, at some points dislike this card and express that dislike all over the place. But in this case, Damorquis just has the right. Molegion does not have the right answers.
Oh, he's going to put the Adrenaline Rush back in. You know, Adrenaline Rush might be going back in, and if Adrenaline Rush goes back in, and then Damorquis pulls Adrenaline Rush with Last Wish, then you're just gonna. Sabbath is never leaving. Like, Sabbath is basically here to stay. But
why even go into round 3?
No, there's no point. But it would be funny. For BM purposes.
And there we see it, Drowner just dragging the Asir right into the Frost. It loses even more points, going on to 7, and Sabbath has an easy time cleaning her up and sweeping her off the floor. And we see, you know, every turn that passes, less and less options for Molegion. And he's 31 points behind. Even if he finds an option, he still has to catch up. There's a lot of points here.
It's 31 points. And the thing is, Molegion, he's playing soldiers, and soldiers they're a slow burner. The whole point is burner. You play soldiers, you play more soldiers, you play more soldiers, you play sentry for 1,000,000 points, and Molegion's just like, I'm done.
We've seen it before. We've seen Colomon passing when he doesn't have Neckers. We've seen, you know, these are decks and situations where you either have the answer or you don't. If you don't, no matter how good you are, no matter how bad your opponent is, it does not matter. You're going to lose that game no matter what, unless your opponent slips and forfeits by accident. But yeah. I think that's not going to happen for Damorquis.
I think it's a very difficult one, because the thing is, with Molegion, it's like you can play into that round knowing that you're just eventually losing and use that time to kind of plan ahead, or you can pass because you're starting to get tilted. Because I think Imlerith is one of those cards. It's just painful. You know, you're trying everything you can to get past it, and everything is dying and dying and dying. And the thing with tournament, like, a lot of it is up here. A lot of it is mental. And Damorquis, he's done this before. This is his 3rd Gwent Open, I believe. Whereas Molegion, new kid on the block. So, you know, maybe the tournament nerves are trying to get to him a little bit.
We see Damorquis has John Calvite left. He has the Alchemy list left. He is not playing soldiers. He is playing the more standard, I think, the more common, more popular Alchemy list. And we see Molegion with Whispering Hillock, which is his own Eridan or Sabbath version. A bit different, has Moonlight instead of very different bronze package, and a few, you know, differences also. In the silver package, a lot more, I think, versatile against other matchups, not as all in on the Sabbath. Like we saw there, I think Damorquis' whole strategy relied around synergy with the Sabbath and really just going all in on that. In this case, I think, we're going to see Whispering Hillock. So Sabbath once again, but in a very different light. And
I think this is going to be
hand from Molegion. He needs to mulligan all these Moonlights away, and he has no Sirens either.
Yeah, and you can see the way he's reacting, and you can tell he's unhappy. And this is something that players do have to be a little bit careful about, because you can see that Molegion is frustrated with his hand. And if Damorquis was paying attention to Molegion, Damorquis would know that Molegion is frustrated with his hand. So it's one of these things, actually, Tailbot says, is he can tell what his opponent has from how they react, and you have to be a little bit careful with that, and it's not something that I think players initially realize.
We see Damorquis, he has the Mandrake, he has the Swears into the Siren as soon as it comes out. If Siren comes out, there's no Sirens in hand, so as soon as if he gets one from Recon, for example, he can play that Swears right into that Siren and get rid of all that tutoring for the Moonlights.
Yeah, I'm so impressed with Damorquis this set. I think Damorquis has been playing this beautifully. Admittedly, you know, Molegion, he hasn't had some great draws in certain matchups. So he's had some cards that were very dominant, and Damorquis said, you know, if I'm going to win, I have to get lucky. But as it is, I feel like Damorquis has done such a good job, and he's shown why he shows up to tournaments again and again.
He's never made it past quarterfinals, though, so this might be his chance to get past it, and it's looking better and better every time. We're going to see a Moonlight here, which is great, but we're also going to see a Swears, I think, coming right back from Damorquis. He knows this is his target. This is the target he needs to hit in this matchup. He saw the recon as well. The recon kind of says, maybe I don't have any in hand. It might just be a bamboozler trying to play around the squares. He's seen it already, so he knows it exists. But it might be, recon saying, I'm desperate. I need to find the Siren to start my game plan. And if he squares me now, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, and you see them saying, oh, you wouldn't want to hurt us, would you? But Damorquis definitely wants to hurt Molegion's strategy. He wants to get rid of those Sirens. He's going to throw them in the bin. And I don't see him not making this play, even if you think you're only going to discard one. He's got two. He's going to be happy with that. Molegion shaking his head, not sure what to do. Playing into this, he's got the one Moonlight, but how does he win? How does he win another round?
That's it. You're going to have to find the Moonlights himself in his deck, and even then you're losing 4 points from playing them without the Siren, so it's not optimal for Molegion. I mean, the start isn't great. You do have that one Moonlight down already. You're going to get your great synergy with your Wolves, but generally it's not the greatest start for Molegion.
Yeah, I think what Molegion is trying to do with the Sabbath is he's trying to wait for Damorquis to play some removal. That's what he has to do. Like, he knows that he's against alchemy. He knows that those Witchers are there. He knows they do 11 damage. A 5-strength Imlerith with 2 armor isn't going to stand up to that. So he maybe has to wait until Damorquis starts to commit a little bit. But Damorquis, on the other hand, he's sitting pretty at this point. He can kind of. He's in control. He can take this how he wants. He can play some Ale, maybe look for some swallow potions, boost a few units, put some big stuff on the board. Just really make it so that it's almost as if Molegion can't play Sabbath, because even now Molegion can't play Sabbath because Roach will kill him. Can you imagine Roach killing Imlerith Sabbath?
That would be quite the story to tell later on in the tavern. But we see here Molegion, double 14s, no Igni, so he's safe on that side. He definitely, you wouldn't do this if your opponent's playing Igni, or you would be a very courageous man. But Molegion here is just racking up the points from the Moonlight. It starts off slow, like you said. It's a 6-point play at the start, but then you get the 14-point bronze plays back to back to back. So it's a great start there. And another important thing to note is that these werewolves are immune. They cannot be targeted. Viper Witchers, they like targeting units before hitting them. So these are great targets for Viper Witcher, but they can't be targeted. So it's going to have to be the Siren, which is at 8 points. It's a decent target, but that's only for now. Obviously, you're not going to have great targets against this matchup. So Viper Witcher's not going to be as fantastic in this matchup, I think. Yeah,
I think what Molegion almost has to do in this situation is just take this round. He has to try and win this round. Then I think he has to bleed Damorquis so that he can look to win in a short round with things like Osril and the Monster's Nest and those kind of cards in order to just try and win that short round. That's going to have to be his win condition, because he doesn't have any more Moonlight, so he can't take another long round after this. This is his Moonlight round. After that, tough luck. He can't play Imlerith because there's too much removal, so he has to try and find a way out, basically. And I think if he can't give up this round, because if he gives up this round, he lost the Moonlight round. What are you going to do then?
Better options here, at least for Molegion. Better than last time with Whispering Hermit. He's behaving a little bit better. But generally, like you said, I think he needs to push for this round. He needs to have control. Damorquis, if he goes into a short round with Nilfgaard, even against Osril and cards like Monster Nest, I think Nilfgaard just has the upper hand. It has some great combo plays with Vulgaforce, with Trish Telekinesis, with Mandrake into an Osril, for example. And there we see just the straight damage. Very decent for a leader, I think. Very decent amount of points. You're not going to complain at a 19-point leader. That's quite above average, I think.
Yeah, that's true. I think you could maybe have considered potentially an Adrenaline Rush onto a werewolf just because they're not targetable. But actually, can you even Adrenaline Rush a werewolf if they're not targetable?
I believe you can. I think it's immune for everything, but we're going to have to check later with the technical Gwent team.
Technical Gwent team, yeah.
I believe you can, but Damorquis now has to be careful, because Molegion, if he catches up, which he has done with a huge tempo swing from his leader, now Damorquis is in a pickle because Molegion was on red coin. He does have a chance to catch up and stay on even and win on even, which means that Damorquis doesn't have carryover, and he can't really keep that card in round 2.
And there is the Triss taking out the Blood Moon. Damorquis has decided enough is enough. This engine has gone far enough. The Blood Moon is out. I think he's out for blood at this point.
If he would have known that there's no more Moonlights from Molegion's side, I think he might have played that earlier, because he would have obviously stopped the werewolves from transforming straight away. He doesn't really know, obviously, Molegion's hand, and we don't see any. We can obviously draw from Frightener, maybe, draw a Moonlight, but generally it's looking grim in that regard. So the whole archetype that you rely on with Moonlights, we might just not see it happen at all in round 2 if he doesn't draw into them.
No, I think Damorquis, he did wait just in case there was more Moonlight in terms of the way he played that, but ultimately you did just discard all of his Sirens, and typically people mulligan the Moonlight. So I think Damorquis could be quite comfortable with that play, knowing that that's kind of it in terms of the Wolves. And this now a 10-point play rather than a 12-point play. I mean, it's not a huge pain in that his regular werewolves rather than his alpha werewolves have been boosted. And Molegion's just out this round. He's had enough.
And he's not looking happy. I mean, this is definitely not a decision he wanted to make. He went into this round thinking he was going to win it. and it didn't turn out that way. His hand is in a bit of a pickle. He has a Sabbath, but he knows that Damorquis can answer back with Mandrake. He should probably expect it either from hand or from Vesemir. It's an easy way to tutor it, or even with Kalvit if you're really getting, you really need to try and find it. And we see great draws from Damorquis. He can mulligan away the Mandrake and have the Vesemir, or he can just use a bronze alchemy card as well. So either or. I'm gonna go for the Mandrake. Maybe keep it as a round 3 finisher.
I mean, it's kind of what do you want to do? I think the Mandrake, it's nice just because you can, that always guarantees the removal of the Imlerth. Like if you end up in a situation where you happen not to have Viper Witches, at least you have that Mandrake. It's also good against Moonlight, in case Molegion draws into Moonlight itself rather than being able to thin it with a Siren. The Mandrake there, it does shut down the, well actually the Sirens are gone, but it does shut down any boosted werewolves, I guess. So it's kind of got a few options here in terms of what he wants to do. But actually, you know what it does shut down the most? Osril and Ghoul, and that's probably why you want to keep it around. Which is why,
but you might want to mulligan a way to keep the maybe like Vilgefort's Vesemir combo for round 3 to use it as a maximum burst possible. But I think he knows that Sabbath might come down this turn if he doesn't dry pass immediately, and he knows that he might want to play Mandrake from hand to save that Vesemir for the extra 6 points in round 3 as a finisher. So I think that's the line of play Damorquis was going for there. Probably anticipating using Mandrake this turn on Sabbath and saving the Vesemir plus an Ale or a Swallow Potion for next turn, but instead he dry passes. He goes all into the next turn and he decides that Moonlights might not be a problem after all.
Yeah, I think the Moonlights are no longer really an issue. It was, like I said, I feel like Molegion had kind of one round and then he wanted to bleed him. And it's going to be really difficult for Molegion to take this with the amount of control that Damorquis has. He can shut down those wolves. We've already seen 2 werewolves spent, the untargetable ones, in the first round. So he's not going to have that kind of safety bubble. If he does find the Moonlight, he's not going to be able to kind of play the Moonlight. Maybe if he finds Moonlight and a werewolf somehow, then he can let that tick and let that get bigger because that is at least untargetable. But looking at his hand at the moment, it's going to be tough. You're going to have to definitely find a Moonlight and then maybe try and recon a werewolf.
We're going to see Adrenaline Rush as well in Molegion's hand. He can't obviously play it for points because it doesn't give you any points. Instead, we see Iris' Companion. What is going to get here might just be maybe a gold card or just a Moonlight. That's how desperate we are at this point.
And that is a great discard. Iris' Companions. They're companions this time around. That Adrenaline Rush is going in the bin. And that's a dead card from Molegion. So he's very, happy to see that at least, even though the round maybe isn't going in his favor.
I think they owed him one. Last time it was Monster's Nest, this time it's Adrenaline Rush. I think he's, take one, give one. Definitely very, very happy for Molegion. Definitely turned the tables, gave him, quite a bit of a boost in percentages in terms of winning this game. I think it really helped him out there because that was a completely dead card unless you mulliganed it, and if you mulligan it, you might get, another suboptimal card. So Molegion, very happy. Maybe not with the state of the game, but at least with that, one interaction.
Yeah, I think that is, he just knew he needed it. And, we saw gold cards getting rejected. Admittedly, I don't think he would have picked up Maruna playing against Alchemy because, Maruna's not going to survive. But the fact that a card that most people think is bad was the card that he needed for this round. I was saying, he needs a Moonlight round. And he's basically guaranteed it with Iris. Well, Iris' Companions.
And both players very pensive here, thinking what or how to approach this last round where everything is on the line here. Damorquis can end up taking this whole series by winning this game and obviously punching a ticket straight to Challenger as well. So a lot at stake in this game here.
Yeah, so much on the line. He did have that werewolf guaranteed, and you can see Molegion, he's opting to play that because it's kind of like playing nothing when you're in against a reactive deck. That's effectively like Damorquis now. He can't artifact compress it, he can't Mandrake it, he can't Witcher it. Does he have a counter for the Moonlight?
I don't believe he does. He already played Triss, which is the only way to draw that. He has no weather either. He's not playing any Silver Mages. He's not playing Vadermaker. He's not really playing anything that I can see that would counter it or create a hazard on that boon row. So it's looking great. And Black Blood obviously was changed. No more Silvers, no more Catachan spawning, some random Black Bloods every now and then. So that's good for the game, I think, and we're going to see it maybe helping Molegion out as well.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how Molegion opts to play these werewolves. I don't think he's going to play his alpha werewolves into Moonlight because they're targetable. So every 2 points that they gain is points that can potentially be lost, whereas every 2 points you get on the alpha werewolf are points that cannot be lost. Damorquis' list, so in terms of his removal, the only kind of targeted removal he has Vilgefortz. He doesn't have a Scorch, he doesn't have an Igni, which will kill the werewolf. So I would expect Molegion to kind of just let this guy do his thing, and with 7 or 8 rounds turns to go, that's a big, that Moonlight is actually worth a lot more points than you'd expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's a slow play right now. Obviously, tempo-wise, it doesn't look too great, but it's going to add up a lot of points and also synergize with cards that Molegion has in hand as well. His whole deck kind of revolves around both Moonlight and Sabbath, so it's going to be important. And Sabbath's still not played. We normally see it played in round 2 with Adrenaline Rush and the whole combo going down. But in this case, Molegion playing it very safely. I think he knows that no matter what he does, no matter how much he waits, Damorquis is going to wait longer than him. And he's going to have that Mandrake ready to go.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see how it is Molegion opts to play this Imlerith. Because, I mean, you can play Imlerith just as a damage play. And the longer he waits, the more cards are going to get boosted on Damorquis' side, and the quicker it's going to die. So, you do get that one hit. You get that one unanswerable hit. And I guess Molegion has to choose at what point he wants to punch Damorquis, basically.
And Damorquis here stacking the front 2 rows with the bronze units. Mandrake is a possibility. Obviously does not want to stack that back, he lets that Vesemir grow as much as he wants, because really, Mandrake, I mean, it can target him, but right now, it's looking like the bronze units are going to be much more vulnerable.
Yeah, really interesting to see him opt to put the Swallow Potion on a bronze this time around rather than the gold, when there's a Mandrake and, well...
Mandrake will still target golds. Coral's not in the picture this time, thankfully.
But so it is. I'm mixing them up.
He does have to be able to kind of share the value around as many units as possible, and not let one get too big, basically. Yep. And the Vesemir at that point was the biggest, so you want to try and not buff that at least.
Yeah, you are correct. Artifact Compression, the one that cannot target golds. Mandrake cannot target Werewolf.
That is true. Swears?
Why would you eat the Swears rather than the Iris's Companions?
I think he's looking at it now, maybe denying a Sire into. I mean, there's really no reason. I mean, Swears isn't really an issue right now, I think. Maybe just a misplay from Molegion. He's not looking too happy, so potentially just lost 2 points there. The
thing is, with the Ozril, it's kind of like, it's really tempting. It's really tempting to use that Mandrake, but actually he can use the Artifact Compression on it and save the Mandrake for Imlerith. So Damorquis is like his control list. You can see that his plan is to shut down certain decks with this sort of deck as well. Like, remember when we talked about Eridan and we talked about the decks it does bad against, Great Swords, Consume, Soldiers. Then we see Damorquis, this next deck, with so many cards that shut down big units. And you can really see that Damorquis is really trying to target Great Swords and Consume. And Molegion not running Great Swords or Consume, but Damorquis is still managing to find these wins.
I mean, Viper Witcher still has one great target, which is Maruna. You definitely want to kill that immediately, so there is going to still be, a silver lining for that Viper Witcher in hand. He is going to be a happy fellow, having done his job to aid Damorquis' win here. But other than that, like you said, there's no engine units in this deck. This is a Moonlight deck where the engine is the Moonlight, not the cards itself, and most of them are untargetable anyway. So Viper Witcher's not going to find the greatest value, but the Werewolves definitely will. Moonlight is down and they're ready to party. Yeah,
so opting to play the Alpha Werewolf there into the Moonlight, those are potential, targets for Moonlight to buff. Moonlight, it buffs vampires and it buffs beasts. Werewolves and wolves are beasts. So the points can now go on to the little wolves or the alpha werewolf, and those are targetable. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how the boosts happen here. But then Molegion opting to take those 2 points instead of maybe playing it on a different row and putting all of your boosts onto the regular werewolf.
I mean, Damorquis will only lose 1 point from that werewolf going up to 12. He only has the max 11 hits with the 11 alchemy cards, so in the end I think it's worth it to put the wolves there. It's 1 more point anyway, and there's no last rate or kind of swarm row effect that Damorquis can pull out, so in the end it's safer to do this. I think Viper Witcher from hand is probably the option here. Don't think you want to play Cantarella round 3, and Ale's not great when you're playing against a deck that has resets like Cockatrice and also Mandrake. Yeah, and you know what Cantarella is going to offer you anyway in this situation. Cantarella is going to offer you Viper Witcher or Ale. Especially in a game where you've got engines like Moonlight, you definitely, you want to be really wary about extending the round, and I like that choice. See, Calvi into Witcher, a big gap once again. Equal cards, 20 points behind for Molegion. It was looking great with the Moonlight, had a little party with the Wolves there, but at this point, Damorquis just has some great plays left. He has Viper Witcher, which is worth a lot of points. Vilgefortz normally is as well, and he has ways to shut down the Maruna as well, which is kind of he has ways to shut down the Maruna and the Sabbath, which are kind of the dangerous plays here. Yeah, the difficulty for Molegion is Damorquis has so many ways of shutting down Damorquis has so many ways of shutting down Molegion. And the other thing is, Damorquis now knows his Vilgefortz is going to give him Cantarella. That's crucial information, and that's why Jan is so useful as well, is because you see what you're going to draw into. He's going to get Cantarella, and then Cantarella is going to offer him Ale and something else. And he may be able to thin that Ale, depending on what his recon is, if he has any. Actually, I don't think he has. Well, they're all on the board, so he doesn't have any more Vicar, so I don't think he can thin the Ale. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Vilgefortz. And Sabbath, even if he comes down, we see a few big units already. Which was the Cockatrice coming down trying to aid the Sabbath. We still see the 10-point Vesemir in the back, creating quite a fair duel with that Sabbath. And there are there's going to be more Ales, more boosts coming in, so they're going to be great for resets for Molegion, but not so great for the Sabbath, which might end up being an absolutely terrible gold in this game. So this is why Molegion kind of wanted to steer clear of just going all eggs in one basket with the Sabbath and going all in like Damorquis did, because sometimes it just doesn't work in some matchups.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame to see, like, Damorquis' deck, it was an all-in Sabbath deck, and we kind of saw it shine. And then Molegion, his Sabbath deck, it just isn't working out.
Especially now if you have the Viper Witchers, you have the Mandrakes, you have all these different answers that can deal with it very easily.
Yeah, and then we see the Black Blood there, the options being, I think that we saw the regular Foglet there. Yeah, there's the regular Foglet, little baby
Don't want
Foglet,
that guy.
big boy Foglet. Or we have the Ekamara, which can drain a unit by 3.
Which Ekimara is the best choice in terms of points. And it doesn't really matter what unit you hit. In the end, it's going to be just the solid 13-point swing, which is okay.
The other thing it does is it does get another 10 on the board, so that even if Molegion did something about Vesemir somehow, in order to try and play the Imlerith, there's another target already on the board that is shutting down that Imlerith. And because the Royal Decree, the Imlerith is in hand, you can't Royal Decree into Imlerith. If you Royal Decree into Imlerith, Imlerith gets +2. Imlerith can then kill 10s. But as it stands currently, the biggest thing the Imlerith can kill is a 9, and there are no 9s on the board. Well, there's nothing smaller than a 10, or bigger than a whatever.
We see cards that Molegion, I mean, Sabbath now is just, I think he knows that it's absolutely useless in this game. He knows it's a dead card. It's not going to get, really any points at all for the most part. I mean, a little bit, but really not much at all. He might just play it now. It will have a decent fight against this Vesemir, but not decent enough. Sabbath will go down. Puts down Vesemir to 3, so it was, a 7-point play. But I mean, that's not what you want from a gold. And Maruna is going to be much of the same. This is a deck that really, in some cases with a gold, goes all in and decides, if it works, it really works. But if it doesn't work, I'm losing the game and I'm losing the series, and I'm not getting my ticket to Challenger for now. Yeah, we might get it later, but for now, he's not going to punch his ticket.
I think you can't go Maruna in this matchup. Like, you have to go Tribute, right? You have to go Whisper's Tribute into Monster's Nest, because you know Maruna is going to die. It's not worth it, and then hope that that's somehow enough. You see the Mandrake there healing up the damage. So that 7-point play, it just enabled the Mandrake, healed that 7 plus the 6, and well, actually it didn't heal to 10, it heals to 6, but it still gave him options for the Mandrake. And Damorquis is so comfortable. Imlerith is gone. He's happy to play that Mandrake now. He's not particularly worried about anything that Molegion can do. And
he has the answer to Maruna as well, so I mean, I think he knows that he's in control here. He has all the reactive plays he needs. He's going to be playing, he's going to have last play as well, so he has every single chance to answer back and really dictate the terms in this final 3 cards. And really dictate the terms for this series, because this might be the last game we see here between Damorquis and Molegion. We were saying Molegion was favored, but I think the matchups really went Damorquis' way. I think every single matchup that lined up was not favored, but gave him the best chances of winning. And I think he also played very, very well this tournament.
And I think what really helped Damorquis was knowing Molegion's decks, because we saw Damorquis before this matchup. He was considering every single matchup he could have, and he had a list of, if this happens, I should do this. If this happens, I should do this. In case of this happening, I want to do this. I'm really going to hope that Molegion doesn't draw well and I get, a little bit of luck in my favor. And that's something that he honestly felt he needed if he could actually win. But the thing is, like, Damorquis has played this so well. Like, give props to Molegion. Molegion's played well too, but Damorquis had the uphill battle. Damorquis, he was the one trying to siege the fortress, and it looks like he's going to manage to do it.
We see Cantor, like you said, coming down. Not the greatest thing to play in round 3, but it gives him even more of a chance to say, I want to be reactive here. I want to have 2 cards advantage over you, and really dictate the terms of the final few turns. Dictate the terms. Oh, yeah, terms and turns. Very, very similar words. But in this case, I think Damorquis, he knows he has this in the bag. He has the card advantage. He's only 3 points behind, being a card down, and he has the answers for Molegion's, anything Molegion can possibly bring out here.
Yeah, he has the card advantage. Molegion's not even going to try and play Maruna. That would be the point at which he played it. And Damorquis, with that choice, he has Recon, so picking the Ale, making sure that Recon's there, Recon onto a Viper Witcher onto, I guess, the 10 or the 13, depending on whether
13 is one more point, because he has 11.
Yeah, that is true. And I think he's seen the Mandrake, so... Has he seen the Mandrake? Yeah, we have seen the Mandrake, so he's not too worried about a reset. So they're opting to go for the points. That's a play you don't want to make if they haven't seen Mandrake, because they just heal it back up, boost it by another 6, and then it's kind of like a waste. Molegion, 1 point up, 2 cards down, and we see 27 points in Damorquis' hand. I don't think...
We can try and add suspense. We have Whisper's Tribute still. Never mind. We're still in business.
Yeah, the tribute into the Monster's Nest.
That's still very,
into
very,
the ghoul,
very possible.
Into Iris's companions. Is it enough?
That's a big play. I think it might just be.
Oh.
We're looking at just Maruna, but that's a lot of points.
Yeah, no, I didn't expect the Maruna. I did expect the companions, but I don't know if it's enough. I don't know.
And the Moonlight's still ticking as well.
The Moonlight's going to cinch it for him, right?
It's gonna
13
be-
to 12.
It's going to be by 1 point.
1 point! Holy smokes! Molegion grips onto this match by a hair, and that was a fantastic game of Gwent.
We were looking at just Maruna, but Wispa's Tribute clutches it for Molegion, ends up being a huge play with Monster's Nest, the 6-point tutor, and the Ghoul as well, and that was a fantastic match to watch.
And Damorquis is just like, you got me. But that was, this is the thing. People were saying, you know, Homecoming, we're not going to be seeing, you know, any changes, so the tournaments are going to get repetitive. But this is Gwent at its best. This is Gwent at its most creative, and these decks have been such a delight to watch. It's going to be amazing to see them against their intended decks, because obviously you can tell with the way that Molegion and Damorquis have built their decks, they were expecting, you know, great swords, they were expecting consume, those kind of things, and they matched into each other. But next round, tomorrow, Pro Neo versus the winner of this, that's going to be such a good game. I'm so excited, man. This is what I love about Gwent. Sorry, I'm like proper gushing here, but this is what I love to see about Gwent is these kind of plays and these kind of situations where it's kind of anyone goes. And we were discounting Damorquis at the start. We're like, he's gonna have an uphill battle, and then we're like, oh, Damorquis is gonna win. And now it's like Molegion. We're like, oh, he's gonna have a hard time. And then he's managed to cinch it by a hair.
And down to game 5, Soldiers is normally favored in this matchup. Viper Witchers just don't have the right targets, and overall Soldiers has a much higher ceiling where you can't really deal with it because these slave infantries are such low power. They're not like engine units where you can really just deal with them with Viper Witchers. So I think, I mean, Molegion, he went from ruling it out completely, thinking that Maruna was the only option there, but he clutched it with a Wispa's Tribute, and in this matchup I think he's definitely favored here.
And the thing is that Cantarella really hurt Damorquis. That is the thing. The Vilgefortz into the Cantarella, he drew the Ale, but he extended the Moonlight, and the 12 points. The 12 points weren't enough, and I guess for Molegion, it's like when the moon hits your wolf like a big pizza pie. You know, that's amore.
That was a fantastic. I mean, the perfect sequencing for Molegion really ended up taking that last game. And we go to game 5 between two players that know each other very well, so everything on the line here, and of course also the challenger ticket. And Molegion goes for the dry pass. Both players need to populate their graveyard, so I think he's not really losing out here. If Damorquis also dry passes next turn, they're both going to have, you know, a bit of a weakness there because they both haven't played their slave infantries or their Viper Witchers or novices. So both players, I think, know they cannot dry pass going to next turn, and being on blue coin Molegion, I think that was the right option.
I absolutely love this pass from Molegion. Also, because the thing is, he knows that he's up against Alchemy, and like Molegion, he doesn't even need to populate his own graveyard because Alchemy populates your graveyard for you. Like, especially when you're hitting for 11s, you're not going to have a lot of targets where you hit them and don't kill them. So the dry pass coming out of Molegion, I think that's why we saw Helic last round, was because he knew that he could dry pass on blue coin.
That's definitely true. I mean, I think he knows, and Soldiers in general just has a better matchup against Alchemy. Alchemy is good against certain decks that have, you know, engine units like Great Swords, but against this deck it just doesn't do as much. Damorquis has a spy here, and Molegion's going to answer right back. No one playing Rain Farm, so no kind of way to. Well, Molegion is playing it, but not in this turn exactly. You can play into Joachim later on.
Yeah, if you're running Rain Farm, you always have 2 spies, and him deciding here, one of those is going to the bottom of the deck. So he has to decide which of these is going to be more valuable. Would I rather have the Igni, or would I rather have the Rain Farm? Because the other one is like, bye-bye, to the bottom of the deck you go. And I like that choice. I think Rain Farm was wise. It
could end up being, you know, a dead card if you draw into Joachim later on, so you have to be careful with the mulligans as well. But yeah, overall I think Joachim gives, you know, a big option to just create a huge tempo swing. And Igni could be good, but could also be dead in round 3 if the situation arises. So I think it's a safer option to pick the Rain Farm.
Yeah, I think the Rain Farm into the Joachim, it also gives you access to units, right? And this deck is all about playing units. And Molegion, he's sitting there, 3 slave infantries in hand, you know, 2 sentries in hand. There's a Vreemed in the deck. You see the Nilfgaardian Gate, that gives you access to the Vreemed. It also gives you access to the Joachim, but you don't really need it. And actually, it also gives you access to the Swears.
And Molegion is now probably going to start playing his slave infantry, just trying to fill his board with these guys, because once they're down, sentries are going to be absolutely massive. More than 20 points for a bronze card is fantastic, and you're playing 9-point slave infantry. This is not like a Siren where it's 6 points, or, you know, some very, very slow setup cards like Neckers as well.
Oh no! Oh, Damorquis, don't do it, buddy! Don't do it. He's going to be. Like, he has to do it, but at the same time, because it affects the, it counters the recruits, it makes recruits less powerful. I mean, it does enable his ointments this turn, but that's fine because he's got Viper Witcher, so he's probably going to enable something any turn, but those slave infantries are in Molegion's hand. That Swears is going to discard nothing. It's not like last game, you know, throwing Sirens in the bin.
Is he going to take the bait? He's thinking about it. He's really thinking about it. The time's winding down.
Yeah, the rope is.
I think it's the right play. You just have to take it.
ticking.
You don't know what's in your opponent's hand. You can't really decide. So I think you just have to do it.
Yeah, you have to do it. We're going to see his reaction here as he discards nothing.
We're right.
Oh,
That's life.
Poor Damorquis, like, takes it on the chin.
And Molegion continues. It's a very linear game plan. Play a slave infantry, play another one, and then play a sentry. I mean, maybe there's a bit more complexity behind the scenes, but for these first turns, it's going to be just play slave infantries.
Yeah, just flood the board. And in this kind of situation, flooding the board works. We saw that for Molegion, flooding the board wasn't an option against Sabbath, but against this kind of deck, this is where soldiers start to shine. And this is why I think a lot of people are kind of favoring soldiers in some way over alchemy.
And Damorquis has to find the absolutely perfect turn to pass where he makes the round 3 a little bit shorter, but doesn't get overpassed in one card in this turn. So that's really the sweet spot for Damorquis. He has to, once the third slave infantry comes out, he has to, I think, start thinking about getting out of here because those sentries are going to be worth so many points.
Oh, it's so difficult for Damorquis because the dry pass from Molegion, I absolutely loved it. And the fact that Molegion had his spy to counter Damorquis' spy has put Damorquis in such a tough position in this matchup, combined with the kind of no-value swears. He's in a very tricky position, and just infantry, like the slaves, are out to fight.
And Damorquis has to go very high tempo here, trying to play out his novices, get his graveyard populated as well with novices and not with Viper Witchers, because they're not as valuable. At least not right now with 2 and 3 point units on the board for Molegion, but this is kind of the sweet spot. Damorquis has to find the pass before Molegion starts overcoming him with 20-point bronze cards. Because after 3 of those, you're going to definitely be behind.
Of course, as you wish.
But with that many slave infantry on the board, it's what, 2 points per slave infantry? 9
He's
plus
counting.
18?
He's counting. This is the math time.
18 and 8?
Everyone at home, take out your calculator. This is some tough math.
I'm going to say 26.
That's a good guess, Douglas. I'll take it.
The thing is, it's so tough. It's so tough. Oh, is he going to be greedy? He's going for the reams.
Push this. He's going to try and... Oh, he didn't find the sentry.
Yeah, but it's not it's not a Hillock with Adrenaline Rush, Spores, and Epidemic.
But I think it was kind of an all-in where if you get it, you maybe win the game, and if you don't get it, it's not the end of the world. You wasted. You ended up wasting, and you can still nod, which is good for taking away some cards from Damorquis' graveyard. Damorquis was kind of scared of the sentry there. He was quite happy when it didn't come down because the sentry would have definitely been enough, and then Damorquis would have had a terribly hard time staying, trying to catch back up and get that extra card back for round 3.
Yeah, this is I think the point. This is the deciding point with the pass.
If he doesn't pass here, that means that Damorquis is saying, I'm going to maybe, probably, definitely go into round 3 with the card down. Because both players had spies, so he couldn't do it that way. Card advantage is a very important thing in Gwent, especially against these decks. I mean, Damorquis has the better finishers, I think, in general.
He's 7 points down. He's 7 points ahead, so 12 is not enough. That puts him 19 ahead. And here comes the sentry.
Sentry means he's going to maybe risk it again. Maybe we're going to see here from
I guess he wants to double check what's on his recon, because he also can thin the deck, and by thinning the deck, it does bring that Igni close to the top. I don't know if that's something that he's looking for, but it brings your silvers also close to the top. You're taking some bronzes out. You're improving your draw for the next round. So he's maybe thinking, if I can get away with the recon, I'll go for it, but actually opting there for the play, and there you go. Molegion's up ahead.
And Damorquis had the sweet spot, but he lost it, and I think he's shaking his head. He knows that at this point, he's signing the contract to go a card down into round 3 because there is no more. You can't play 2 spies, obviously. Those times have gone. But there's no way he can catch up now. I mean, there's just sentries are just too much points.
Yeah, I think you have to. I guess at this point you just have to bleed.
You can bleed and go into a 2-card round 3 for your opponent and a 1-card round 3 for you. But is alchemy that much stronger than soldiers in a short round? I don't think so. Especially when you have cards like Triss, you have into Ointment, into Novice, into Slave Infantry. I mean, you still have some okay burst cards with Vilgefortz as well.
Yeah, it's just not looking that great, unfortunately, for Damorquis. And this is the thing. We were saying that he's going to have a hard time, and this is what we meant when we said he was going to have a hard time.
Soldiers, they work well in the long run, and Damorquis gave Molegion enough of a chance to create a board where he had the chance to start playing 26-point bronzes, and that's just enough to catch up normally, and you just take the card back.
What is Molegion going to draw into? He's going to draw into... You can have Ointment, Ointment, or Ointment. What would you like, Panda?
And there's nothing in the graveyard. This just gave Damorquis the out. Oh my goodness. This might be, game deciding.
Yeah, but opting to discard one of them
does
instead,
Damorquis
that's 1
immediately
point.
pass? Does he say, I'm out of here? He might just do it. I mean,
I don't know.
He was given the opportunity to pass right now. He has the chance to get the card back. Does he value that card though?
But it's valuing a card against a 7... an 8-card, 7-card round
3.
against. It's a 7. So next round would be a 7-card round against soldiers.
I've seen, you can have a 13-card round against soldiers. It could be worse.
I mean, and we know that Molegion is going to draw into Ointment, followed by Ointment. So that is equivalent to Slave Infantry, followed by Slave Infantry. And then what is Molegion going to do? He's going to play Ointment, followed by Ointment, and he's going to just do this all over again.
It's a tough decision. It really is.
It's a recurring nightmare.
It's a tough decision, and no ways to counter this swarm in Damorquis' deck. It's great against single engine targets, but he goes for the pass, so he values the card. I think it's a very wise decision, and Molegion got incredibly unlucky to get the triple Ointment from the Calvite. I think Damorquis was given a second chance by God, because that is not something that normally happens. Your opponent playing a 5-point play where it matters, so much.
Yeah, I'm interested to see that Molegion opted to discard the Ointment. I think can you not choose not to play, or do you have to play one? Oh no, it's Vic of Varro that you can choose not to play. So he did have to discard that.
The Novice will be enough, regardless of what is drawn, unless he draws something that thunders his own. I don't know. There's not really any option, I think, here. So unless he Mardromes his own unit.
He can heal up Cantarella.
That's an option always.
Just a little bit of overkill. Or he can weaken something that's going into Damorquis' graveyard. That's probably a better play.
He could have also healed his own Novice to Resolute with Ointment, would be at 5 points, and would be a great pull for Molegion to get later with Ointment, maybe Triss into Ointment or just regular Ointment, which he has plenty of in his deck.
I do think with those Ointments, though, you're going to be prioritizing those Slave Infantry. And if you... So it's probably more sensible to try and harm Damorquis than it is to try and help yourself. But here we go into the final round of the final game of the second series of Gwent Open number 6.
And Damorquis, he has gold, but he also has a Swallow Potion, which isn't the greatest card in the world. And on the other hand, I think Molegion has a pretty dream hand here. He has a Sentry coming from the Recruit, no matter what. He has a Recon into possibly, I believe, a Novice into an Ointment. He has the Triss as well to get another Ointment out. He has a Vic of Aromatic as well. That's a very interesting card here. It's going to definitely come in handy. Into a Novice from Damorquis' board, depleting his own board of Novices where Viper Witchers aren't that useful in this matchup, and also being able to start the Slave Infantry train.
This Triss, though, is going to be interesting because Ointment isn't guaranteed. Because Damorquis, he's got those Swallow Potions, he's got the Mahakam Ale, then Ointment and Recon they both have, plus Mardrome. Because Molegion has that one Mardrome, there is a chance that Triss doesn't get him an Ointment, and I think that's something that Damorquis really has to hope for. He got that triple Ointment draw on Molegion. He has to hope that all of those Ointments all of the RNG was put in Ointment there and not here.
And Blackblood here, Ancient Fog again, one of the better options for Blackblood, so he's going to take it. I think Damorquis' real chance in this matchup would have been maybe using Mardrome early on in the Slave Infantries and the one that does not get doomed, getting rid of it completely. You can play it with Triss, for example, and I think Damorquis doesn't run a Mardrome himself, so he has it with Triss at least, to kind of get rid of the whole strategy from the ground up. But in this case, Molegion has run rampant with his Slave Infantry. He's gotten all the points he needed, and this round will be, I think, much of the same.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, a replay of round 2. Round 1, pass. Round 2 and round 3, kind of just the same kind of recurring strategy. And, I mean, Damorquis, he can Yan, he can see what he's going to get with Poet, he can see what he's going to get with Vilgefort. So, he does have access to information, at least, so he can try and plan his strategy the best that he can. But he doesn't really have the tools to stop Molegion from doing what Molegion wants to do.
Oh, no Ointment for Molegion. You were right.
There you go.
You should stop jinxing the player, Dragris.
Dude, don't hate the player, hate
So
the
these
game.
options are okay, but they're taking so many points away in the future from the next plays with Sentries, for example. So Molegion has lost a lot of points there. Damorquis, I think he knows what happened. He's studied this matchup before, and he knows he got, again, a little bit lucky there. He's gotten lucky twice already. He got the chance to pass in round 2, and now the lack of Ointment from the Triss.
Yeah, lack of Ointment from the Triss, not what you want to see. Yes, that was a 12-point play, but those 3 extra Slave Infantry make each and every one of those Sentries just that bit bigger. But it's still, Molegion, he does have access to a lot of cards in his deck. He's got a Vilgefort, he's got Rainfarn, he didn't draw Wakim, and I believe the Vilgefort is going to draw into an Ointment. So, he does have access, I think, to more Slave Infantry. He took the risk there with Triss, didn't get it. I would imagine we'll probably see a Vilgefort onto the Vic of Varro, and then pulling out more Slave Infantry?
You normally want to try and play your secure plays early on. You can guarantee the Slave Infantry, and then play kind of the more random plays like the Joachim, like the Vilgefort, where you might get a Sentry early, or you don't get optimal value from it. So I think that's what he was doing with Triss, just guaranteeing the Ointment, which he didn't guarantee in the end. So we'll see Joachim here. Hopefully he can get lucky and get a Novice. Perfect. So he does get the Slave Infantry to kind of get the better value from Sentries later on. Which was, get a bit bad luck initially and then a bit of good luck, so it compensates in the end. But That was definitely good for Molegion, getting that novice.
Yeah, and in terms of the recruit, does he have another sentry in the deck?
He does. He has one more sentry left, so he has the chance to use that recruit to fish for that, or he has a chance to a sire back. He can really, I mean, he can.
Yeah, he can a sire back.
Only has 3
into
cards
it.
left, so he can really play around with the sire and try and either brick his opponent or try and make his draws with Vilgefortz just a tiny bit better.
Yeah, people may wonder, why is a sire in this deck? Typically, we see it for things like putting Roach back in and alchemy cards. In this instance, it's just to stop that recruit from being dead, because you can just put slave drivers back into your deck. You can put sentries back into your deck, and in this situation, he has, he can control, he can manipulate what it is that the recruit is going to draw. Normally it's random, but if you only have one kind of unit in the deck, you can guarantee it.
Yeah, and you can fix your draws with ointment as well if you don't have any ointment in your deck to draw with novice, for example. So there's a lot of options there for sure, and definitely doing like the Triss trains with the novices into ointments as well. So it's a lot to think about, but a sire is useful in so many different ways.
Yeah, no, I do really like the deck. I think it's a very versatile deck, but I think it is a little bit of a tough one to navigate, and I feel like Molegion, he's done a really solid job this game. Damorquis, in terms of his hand, is going to be difficult. I think those Witchers, there's no big targets for them. It's another situation where artifact compression isn't working out for him. Artifact compression, it's in there to stop certain strategies, and this is not one of them.
But you do have, Vilgefortz and Triss, which are pretty powerful cards, and also your leader Call V, which is a great tutor for anything you might need and gives you a lot of different plays. You have 4 cards left, so I mean, it pretty much tells you, what do you want from your deck. I'll give it to you. With Vilgefortz coming down, it'll be 3 cards. So, and there's a recruit with a sentry, and still a fairly decent swing. Not optimal. You don't have a billion slave inventories, but you have enough to make it where it's a really good bronze average play.
But you're ending up in a situation where you're saying that a 20-point play is not optimal. At that point,
it could be higher.
It's getting a little bit gross. And the thing is, he's got the sentry in hand, and then I believe Asir, she shuffles your deck, doesn't she?
She might. We're gonna when we see the text, we'll find out for sure. But let's keep that suspense going for now for the audience. The thing to keep in mind though, if he does try and negatively impact Damorquis' deck, he could maybe potentially ruin that Vilgefortz if it ends up pulling what he doesn't want it to pull. So we're gonna find out very soon what Molegion's plans are with it, because it has so many different options.
Yeah, opting to kill one of the slave infantry, but you know what that does? That makes the sentry an 18-point play instead of a 20-point play.
And still 3 cards left for both players, only 1 point separating both. So this is a very, very close game. We're going to see a Cancerella maybe going back for Damorquis.
Yeah, but this is where Molegion, he has to be careful about what was it he's going to choose to put back in the deck, and I think he wants a Vreemed.
I think he wants to try and fish for that sentry and go for the max. I mean, that might just be it.
So then if he offers to
put in sentry and the Nilfgaardian Gate to have a double chance to get it, basically.
Well, the Vreemed and the Gate basically helps him improve the odds of finding Vreemed.
Or he might just find, I think maybe putting a sentry down is I mean, it depends how risky you want to get here.
Yeah, the thing is, it's like, if you're going for Vreemed, you're hoping for a sentry, and there are a lot of soldiers on Nilfgaard, and
you might not get it.
There are bad soldiers. You can get a Daerlan, a Spotter, and a Alba Spearman. And then
there's bad options. There's definitely bad options.
And we've seen some bad options this game. So
there's also Igni from Molegion. We have to take that into account. From Vilgefortz, it might be a possibility. And there's currently no Igni available, so I think the sentry has to come down first, no matter what.
Yeah, Igni did just get shuffled back into the deck. That's interesting, because if there is an Igni here,
but he could also maybe go for slave infantry first from the Vreemed if he gets it. So
I don't like it. I think he should have. Oh, Swears.
Swear, which is a terrible, 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 terrible card to get here. Not going to help at all. All the extra Call of you have in your deck, get out of here. Go to the graveyard.
you had Swears, Igni, and then the 2 you put in, and you got Swears.
We see 2 gold cards versus a sentry, and a lot of points. Who wins this, Gagger? This is going to be a tough one to call.
I mean, he's down 17.
But we have to see what Vilgefortz pulls and what Triss pulls. Obviously, the sentry is going to be worth a decent amount of points. 18 points, not too shabby for a bronze card.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know.
We're going to put Molegion up a lot of points. I mean, it's going to be... 2 gold cards, and these 2 gold cards, they definitely have the power to do it, but Damorquis is going to have a little bit of luck on his side.
There's also not a great Vilgefortz burn target. Like, typically you want to be burning a 1 or a 2, maybe a 3. The smallest that Damorquis has is a 4.
Yeah, Molegion at 94 points after this sentry comes down, unless he interacts with the
Although if he gets an ointment, he may be able to res a Vicavaro potentially, or something smaller. There's the ointment. And he's actually opting for the 2 strength Viper, which he can now burn. 67 to 65. This is 18, so he's up 16. So Vilgefortz needs to pull
17 points. Is that a possibility? No,
So
we need an
he needs to
11-point pull. Is this possible for Damorquis to? I mean, this is 2-2. Final moment of this game here, guys.
I don't know. I feel sick. I feel like these players must be feeling sick. Like, this is it. This is what it comes down to. What is at the top of Damorquis' deck? Is it going to be enough? Ointment?
I think this has to be enough.
He needs
Viper
10.
Witcher into the 9.
We follow Letho.
That's enough by 2 points. Damorquis takes it.
That,
Moves on to the semifinals. Punches his ticket to the Challenger. We're going to see that in August very soon. But Damorquis takes down his team in Molegion. That was a great game from both players.
that was one of the best sets of Gwent I've ever watched at a tournament.